Yeah, the truth is I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm very excited to see with sort of the second participant that we implant what the journey is like for them, because we'll have learned a lot more. Potentially, we can help them understand and explore that direction more quickly. This is something I didn't, this wasn't me prompting Nolan to go try this. He was just exploring how to use his device and figured it out himself. But now that we know that that's a possibility, that maybe there's a way to, for example, hint the user, don't try super hard during calibration. Just do something that feels natural, or just directly control the cursor. Don't imagine explicit action. And from there, we should be able to hopefully understand how this is for somebody who has not experienced that before. Maybe that's the default mode of operation for them. You don't have to go through this intermediate phase of explicit motions.
Or maybe if that naturally happens for people, you can just occasionally encourage them to allow themselves to move the cursor.
Right.
Actually, sometimes just like with a 4-minute mile, just the knowledge that that's possible.
Yes. Pushes you to do it.
Yeah, enables you to do it. And then it becomes trivial.
Mm-hmm.
And then it also makes you wonder, this is the cool thing about humans. Once there's a lot more human participants, they will discover things that are possible.
Yes. And share their experiences.
Yeah, and share
each other.
Yeah. And that because of them sharing it, they'll be able to do it.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, that's unlocked for everybody.
Yeah.
Because just the knowledge sometimes is the thing that enables it to do it.
Yeah. I mean, and just to comment on that too, like we've probably tried like 1,000 different ways to do various aspects of decoding. And now we know like what the right subspace is to continue exploring further. Again, thanks to Nolan and the many hours he's put into this. And so even just that help constrain sort of the beam search of different approaches that we could explore really helps accelerate for the next person, the set of things that we'll get to try on day one, how fast we hope to get them to useful control, how fast we can enable them to use it independently and to get value out of the system. So yeah, massive hats off to Nolan and all the participants that came before him to make this technology a reality.
So how often are the updates to the decoder? Because Nolan mentioned like, okay, there's a new update that we're working on, and that in the stream he said he plays the snake game because it's like super hard. It's a good way for him to test like how good the update is. So, and he says like sometimes the update is a step backwards. It's like it's a constant like iteration. So how often, like what does the update entail? Is it mostly on the decoder side?
Yeah, a couple comments. So one is, it's probably worth drawing a distinction between sort of research sessions where we're actively trying different things to understand like what the best approach is, versus sort of independent use where we wanted to have ability to just go use the device how anybody would want to use their MacBook. And so what he's referring to is, I think, usually in the context of a research session where we're trying, many, many different approaches to, even unsupervised approaches like we talked about earlier to try to come up with better ways to estimate his true intention and more accurately decode it. And in those scenarios, I mean, we try in any given session, he'll sometimes work for like 8 hours a day. Yeah. And so that can be, hundreds of different models that we would try in that day, like a lot of different things. Now, it's also worth noting that we update the application he uses quite frequently. I think, sometimes up to like 4 or 5 times a day, we'll update his application with different features or bug fixes or feedback that he's given us. So he's a very articulate person who is part of the solution. He's not a complaining person. He says, hey, here's this thing that I've discovered is not optimal in my flow. Here's some ideas how to fix it. Let me know what your thoughts are. Let's figure out how to solve it. And it often happens that those things are addressed within a couple hours of him giving us his feedback, because that's the kind of iteration cycle we'll have. And so sometimes at the beginning of the session he'll give us feedback, and at the end of the session he's giving us feedback on the next iteration of that process or that setup.
That's fascinating, because one of the things you mentioned that there was 271 pages of notes taken from the BCI sessions, and this was just in March. So one of the amazing things about human beings that they can provide, especially ones who are smart and excited and all like positive and good vibes like Nolan, that they can provide feedback, continuous feedback.
Yeah. It also requires, just to brag on the team a little bit, I work with a lot of exceptional people, and it requires the team being absolutely laser focused on the user and what will be the best for them. And it requires like a level of commitment of, okay, this is what the user feedback was. I have all these meetings. We're going to skip that today and we're going to do this. Mm-hmm. That level of focus, commitment is, I would say, underappreciated in the world. And also, you obviously have to have the talent to be able to execute on these things effectively. And we have that in loads.
Yeah, and this is such a interesting space of UX design because there's so many unknowns here. And I can tell UX is difficult because of how many people do it poorly. It's just not a trivial thing.
Yeah. It's also, UX is not something that you can always solve by just constant iterating on different things. Like sometimes you really need to step back and think globally, am I even in like the right sort of minima to be chasing down for a solution? Like there's a lot of problems in which sort of fast iteration cycle is the predictor of how successful you will be. As a good example, like in an RL simulation, for example, the more frequently you get reward, the faster you can progress. It's just an easier learning problem the more frequently you get feedback. But UX is not that way. I mean, users are actually quite often wrong about what the right solution is. And it requires a deep understanding of the technical system and what's possible, combined with what the problem is you're trying to solve. Not just how the user expressed it, but what the true underlying problem is to actually get to the right place.
Yeah, that's the old like stories of Steve Jobs, like rolling in there, like, yeah, the user is a useful signal, but it's not a perfect signal. And sometimes you have to remove the floppy disk drive or whatever I forgot all the crazy stories of Steve Jobs, like making wild design decisions. Mm-hmm. But some of it is aesthetic, that some of it is about the love you put into the design, which is very much a Steve Jobs, Johnny Ive type thing. But when you have a human being using their brain to interact with it, it also is deeply about function. It's not just aesthetic.
Yep.
And that you have to empathize with a human being before you, while not always listening to them directly. Like you have to deeply empathize. It's fascinating. It's really, really fascinating. And at the same time, iterate, right? But not iterate in small ways. Sometimes a complete, like rebuilding the design. He said that, Nolan said in the early days, the UX sucked, but you improved quickly. Yep. What was that journey like?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give one concrete example. So he really wanted to be able to read manga. This is something that it sounds like a simple thing, but it's actually a really big deal for him. And he couldn't do it with his mouse stick. It wasn't accessible. You can't scroll with the mouse stick on his iPad on the website that he wanted to be able to use to read the newest manga. And so
might be a good quick pause to say the mouth stick is a thing he's using, holding a stick in his mouth to scroll on a tablet.
Right. Yeah. It's basically, you can imagine it's a stylus that you hold between your teeth. Yeah. It's basically a very long stylus.
And it's exhausting. It hurts, and it's inefficient.
Yeah. And maybe it's also worth calling out, there are other alternative assistive technologies, but the particular situation Nolan's in, and this is not uncommon, and I think it's also not well understood by folks, is that, he's relatively spastic, so he'll have muscle spasms from time to time. And so any assistive technology that requires him to be positioned directly in front of a camera, for example, an eye tracker, or anything that requires him to put something in his mouth, just is a no-go, because he'll either be shifted out of frame when he has a spasm, or if he has something in his mouth, it'll stab him in the face, if he spasms too hard. So these kind of considerations are important when thinking about what advantages a PCI has in someone's life. If it fits ergonomically into your life in a way that you can use it independently when your caretaker's not there, wherever you want to, either in the bed or in the chair, depending on your comfort level and your desire to have pressure sores, all these factors matter a lot in how good the solution is in that user's life. So one of these very fun examples is scroll. So again, manga is something he wanted to be able to read, and there's many ways to do scroll with the BCI. You can imagine like different gestures, for example, the user could do that would move the page. But scroll is a very fascinating control surface because it's a huge thing on the screen in front of you. Mm-hmm. So any sort of jitter in the model output, any sort of error in the model output causes like an earthquake on the screen. Like you really don't want to have your manga page that you're trying to read be shifted up and down a few pixels just because your scroll decoder is not completely accurate. And so this was an example where we had to figure out how to formulate the problem in a way that the errors of the system, whenever they do occur, and we'll do our best to minimize them, but whenever those errors do occur, that it doesn't interrupt the qualia, again, of the experience that the user is having. It doesn't interrupt their flow of reading their book. And so what we ended up building is this really brilliant feature. This is a teammate named Bruce who worked on this really brilliant work called Quick Scroll. And Quick Scroll basically looks at the screen and it identifies where on the screen are scroll bars. And it does this by deeply integrating with macOS to understand where are the scroll bars actively present on the screen using the sort of accessibility tree that's available to macOS apps. And we identified where those scroll bars are, and we provided a BCI scroll bar. And the BCI scroll bar looks similar to a normal scroll bar, but it behaves very differently in that once you sort of move over to it, your cursor sort of morphs onto it. It sort of attaches or latches onto it. And then once you push up or down in the same way that you would use a push to control, the normal cursor, it actually moves the screen for you. So it's basically like remapping the velocity to a scroll action. And the reason that feels so natural and intuitive is that when you move over to attach to it, it feels like magnetic. So you're like sort of stuck onto it. And then it's one continuous action. You don't have to like switch your imagined movement. You sort of snap onto it and then you're good to go. You just immediately can start pulling the page down or pushing it up. And even once you get that right, there's so many little nuances of how the scroll behavior works to make it natural and intuitive. So one example is momentum. Like when you scroll a page with your fingers on the screen, you actually have some like flow. Like it doesn't just stop right when you lift your finger up. The same is true with BCI scroll. So we had to spend some time to figure out what are the right nuances when you don't feel the screen under your fingertip anymore. What is the right sort of dynamic, or what's the right amount of page give, if you will, when you push it to make it flow the right amount for the user to have a natural experience reading their book. And there's a million, I mean, I could tell you, like, there's so many little minutiae of how exactly that scroll works that we spent probably like a month getting right to make that feel extremely natural and easy for the user to navigate.
I mean, even the scroll on a smartphone with your finger feels extremely natural and pleasant. And it probably takes an extremely long time to get that right. And actually, the same kind of visionary UX design that we're talking about. Don't always listen to the users, but also listen to them, and also have like visionary, big, like throw everything out, think from first principles, but also not. Yeah. By the way, it just makes me think that scroll bars on the desktop probably have stagnated and never taken that, like, because the snap, same as it's like snap to grid, snap to scroll bar action you're talking about is something that could potentially be extremely useful in the desktop setting.
Yeah.
Even just for users to just improve the experience. Because the current scroll bar experience on the desktop is horrible.
Yeah.
It's hard to find, hard to control. There's not a momentum. There's, and the intention should be clear. When I start moving towards the scroll bar, there should be a snapping to the scroll bar action. But of course, maybe I'm okay paying that cost, but there's hundreds of millions of people paying that cost nonstop. But anyway, but in this case, this is necessary because there's an extra cost paid by Nolan for the jitteriness. So you have to switch between the scrolling and the reading. There has to be a phase shift between the two. Like when you're scrolling, you're scrolling.
Right. So that is one drawback of the current approach. Maybe one other just sort of case study here. So again, UX is how it works, and we think about that holistically from like even the feature detection level of what we detect in the brain to how we design the decoder, what we choose to decode, to then how it works once it's being used by the user. So another good example in that sort of how it works once they're actually using the decoder, the output that's displayed on the screen is not just what the decoder says. It's also a function of, what's going on the screen. So we can understand, for example, that, when you're trying to close a tab, that very small, stupid little X that's extremely tiny, which is hard to get precisely hit if you're dealing with sort of a noisy output of the decoder, we can understand that that is a small little X you might be trying to hit and actually make it a bigger target for you. Similar to how when you're typing on your phone, if you're used to like the iOS keyboard, for example, it actually adapts the target size of individual keys based on an underlying language model. So it'll actually understand if I'm typing, hey, I'm going to see L, it'll make the E key bigger because it knows Lex is the person I'm going to go see. And so that kind of, predictiveness can make the experience much more smooth, even without, improvements to the underlying decoder or feature detection part of the stack. So we do that with a feature called magnetic targets. We actually index the screen and we understand, okay, these are the places that are, very small targets that might be difficult to hit. Here's the kind of cursor dynamics around that location that might be indicative of the user trying to select it. Let's make it easier. Let's blow up the size of it in a way that makes it easier for the user to sort of snap onto that target. So all these little details, they matter a lot in helping the user be independent in their day-to-day living.
So how much of the work on the decoder is generalizable to P2, P3, P4, P5, PN? How do you improve the decoder in a way that's generalizable?
Yeah, great question. So the underlying signal we're trying to decode is going to look very different in P2 than in P1. For example, channel number 345 is going to mean something different in user 1 than it will in user 2. Just because that electrode that corresponds with channel 345 is going to be next to a different neuron in user 1 versus user 2. But the approaches, the methods, the user experience of how do you get the right sort of behavioral pattern from the user to associate with that neural signal, we hope that will translate over multiple generations of users. And beyond that, it's very, very possible, in fact, quite likely that we've overfit to sort of Nolan's user experience desires and preferences. And so what I hope to see is that, when we get a second, third, fourth participant, that we find sort of what the right wide minimums are that cover all the cases, that make it more intuitive for everyone. And hopefully there's a cross-pollination of things where, oh, we didn't think about that with this user because, they can speak. But with this user who just can fundamentally not speak at all, this user experience is not optimal. And that will actually, those improvements that we make there should hopefully translate then to even people who can speak but don't feel comfortable doing so because they're in a public setting like their doctor's office.
So the actual mechanism of open loop labeling and then closed loop labeling will be the same and hopefully can generalize across the different users as they're doing the calibration step. And the calibration step is pretty cool. I mean, that in itself, the interesting thing about WebGrid, which is like closed loop, it's like fun. I love it when there's like, there used to be kind of an idea of human computation, which is using actions a human would want to do anyway to get a lot of signal from.
Yeah.
And like WebGrid is that, like a nice video game that also serves as great calibration.
It's so funny. I've heard this reaction so many times. Before sort of the first user was implanted, we had an internal perception that the first user would not find this fun.
Yeah.
And so we thought really quite a bit actually about like, should we build other games that like are, more interesting for the user so we can get this kind of data and help facilitate research that's, for long duration and stuff like this. It turns out that like people love this game.
Yeah.
I always loved it, but I didn't know that was a shared perception.
Yeah. And just in case it's not clear, WebGrid there's a grid of, let's say 35 by 35 cells, and one of them lights up blue and you have to move your mouse over that and click on it. And if you miss it and it's red, and
I played this game for so many hours. So many hours.
And what's your record, you said?
I think I have the highest at Neuralink right now. My record's 17 BPS.
17 BPS.
Which is about, if you imagine that 35 by 35 grid, you're hitting about 100 trials per minute. So 100 correct selections in that 1 minute window. So you're averaging about, between 500, 600 milliseconds per selection.
So one of the reasons that I think I struggle with that game is I'm such a keyboard person. So everything is done via keyboard. If I can avoid touching the mouse, it's great. So how can you explain your high performance?
I have like a whole ritual I go through when I play WebGrid. So there's actually like a diet plan associated with this. Like it's a whole thing. So
great.
The first thing
I have to fast for 5 days. I have to go up to the mountains.
Actually, the fasting thing is important. So this is like,
focuses the mind. Yeah.
It's true. Yeah.
It's true.
So what I do is I don't eat for a little bit beforehand. And then I'll actually eat like a ton of peanut butter right before I play. And I get like
this is a real thing.
This is a real thing, yeah. And then it has to be really late at night. This is again a night owl thing I think we share, but it has to be like, midnight, 2 a.m. kind of time window. And I have a very specific like physical position I'll sit in, which is I was homeschooled growing up, and so I did most of my work like on the floor, just like in my bedroom or whatever. And so I have a very specific situation
on the floor
that I sit and play. And then you have to make sure like there's not a lot of weight on your elbow when you're playing so that you can move quickly. And then I turn the gain of the cursor, so the speed of the cursor way up. So it's like small motions that actually move the cursor.
Are you moving with your wrist, or you're never?
I move with my fingers. So my wrist is almost completely still. I'm just moving my fingers. Yeah.
Those, just on a small tangent.
Yeah.
Which I've been meaning to go down this rabbit hole of people that set the world record in Tetris. Those folks, they're playing. There's a way to. Did you see this?
I've seen like the three, like all the fingers are moving.
Yeah, you could find a way to do it where like it's using a loophole, like a bug that you can do some incredibly fast stuff. So it's along that line, but not quite. But you do realize there'll be like a few programmers right now listening to this who will fast and eat peanut butter.
Yeah, please break my record. I mean, the reason I did this literally was just because I wanted the bar to be high for the team. Like I wanted the number that we aim for should not be like the median performance. It should be able to beat all of us at least. Like that should be the minimum bar.
What do you think is possible? Like 20?
Yeah, I don't know what the limits. I mean, the limits you can calculate just in terms of like screen refresh rate and like cursor immediately jumping to the next target. But I'm sure there's limits before that with just sort of reaction time and visual perception and things like this. I'd guess it's in the below 40, but above 20, somewhere in there. It's probably the right number to be thinking about. It also matters like how difficult the task is. You can imagine like some people might be able to do like 10,000 targets on the screen, and maybe they can do better that way. So there's some like task optimizations you could do to try to boost your performance as well.
What do you think it takes for Nolan to be able to do above 8.5? To keep increasing that number? You said like every increase in the number might require different improvements in the system.
Yeah, I think the nature of this work is, the first answer that's important to say is I don't know. This is edge of the research. So Again, nobody's gotten to that number before, so what's next is going to be a heuristic, a guess from my part. What we've seen historically is that different parts of the stack become bottlenecks at different time points. So, when I first joined Neuralink like 3 years ago or so, one of the major problems was just the latency of the Bluetooth connection. It was just like the radio on the device wasn't super good. It was an earlier version of the implant. And it just like, no matter how good your decoder was, if your thing is updating every 30 milliseconds or 50 milliseconds, it's just going to be choppy. And no matter how good you are, that's going to be frustrating and lead to challenges. So, at that point, it was very clear that the main challenge is just get the data off the device in a very reliable way, such that you can enable the next challenge to be tackled. And then at some point, it was, actually the modeling challenge of how do you just build a good mapping, like the supervised learning problem of you have a bunch of data and you have a label you're trying to predict. Just what is the right neural decoder architecture and hyperparameters to optimize that? That was a problem for a bit. And once you solved that, it became a different bottleneck. I think the next bottleneck after that was actually just sort of software stability and reliability. If you have widely varying sort of inference latency in your system, or your app just lags out every once in a while, it decreases your ability to maintain and get in a state of flow, and it basically just disrupts your control experience. And so there's a variety of different software bugs and improvements we made that basically increased the performance of the system, made it much more reliable, much more stable, and led to a state where we could reliably collect data to build better models with. So that was a bottleneck for a while. It's just sort of like the software stack itself. If I were to guess right now, there's sort of two major directions you could think about for improving BPS further. The first major direction is labeling. So labeling is, again, this fundamental challenge of given a window of time where the user is expressing some behavioral intent, what are they really trying to do at the granularity of every millisecond? And that, again, is a task design problem. It's a UX problem. It's a machine learning problem. It's a software problem. It sort of touches all those different domains. The second thing you can think about to improve BPS further is either completely changing the thing you're decoding or just extending the number of things that you're decoding. So this is sort of in the direction of functionality. Mm-hmm. Basically, you can imagine giving more clicks. For example, a left click, a right click, a middle click, different actions like click and drag, for example, and that can improve the effective bitrate of your communication prosthesis. If you're trying to allow the user to express themselves through any given communication channel, you can measure that with bits per second. But what actually matters at the end of the day is how effective are they at navigating their computer. And so from the perspective of the downstream tasks that you care about, functionality and extending functionality is something we're very interested in, because not only can it improve the sort of number of BPS, but it can also improve the downstream sort of independence that the user has and the skill and efficiency with which they can operate their computer.
Would the number of threads increasing also potentially help?
Yes. Short answer is yes. It's a bit nuanced how that curve or how that manifests in the numbers. So what you'll see is that if you sort of plot a curve of number of channels that you're using for decode versus either the offline metric of how good you are at decoding or the online metric of sort of in practice how good is the user at using this device, you see roughly a log curve. So as you move further out in number of channels, you get a corresponding sort of logarithmic improvement in control quality and offline validation metrics. The important nuance here is that each channel corresponds with a specific, represented intention in the brain. So, for example, if you have a channel 254, it might correspond with moving to the right. Channel 256 might mean move to the left. If you want to expand the number of functions you want to control, you really want to have a broader set of channels that covers a broader set of imagined movements. You can think of it like kind of like Mr. Potato Man, actually. Like if you had a bunch of different imagined movements you could do, how would you map those imagined movements to input to a computer? You could imagine, handwriting to output characters on the screen. You could imagine just typing with your fingers and have that output text on the screen. You could imagine different finger modulations for different clicks. You can imagine wiggling your big nose for opening some menu, or wiggling your big toe to have Command Tab occur or something like this. So it's really the amount of different actions you can take in the world depends on how many channels you have and the information content that they carry.
Right. So that's more about the number of actions. So actually, as you increase the number of threads, that's more about increasing the number of actions you're able to perform.
One other nuance there that is worth mentioning. So again, our goal is really to enable a user with paralysis to control the computer as fast as I can. So that's BPS. With all the same functionality I have, which is what we just talked about, but then also as reliably as I can.
Yeah.
And that last point is very related to channel count discussion. So as you scale out number of channels, the relative importance of any particular feature of your model input to the output control of the user diminishes. which means that if the sort of neural non-stationarity effect is per channel, or if the noise is independent, such that more channels means on average less output effect, then your reliability of your system will improve. So one sort of core thesis that at least I have is that scaling channel count should improve the reliability of the system without any work on the decoder itself.
Can you linger on the reliability here? So first of all, when you say non-stationarity of the signal, which aspect are you referring to?
Yeah, so maybe let's talk briefly what the actual underlying signal looks like. So again, I spoke very briefly at the beginning about how when you imagine moving to the right or imagine moving to the left, neurons might fire more or less. And the frequency content of that signal, at least in the motor cortex, is very correlated with the output intention or the behavioral task that the user is doing. You could imagine, actually, this is not obvious, that rate coding, which is the name of that phenomenon, is like the only way the brain could represent information. You can imagine many different ways in which the brain could encode intention. And there's actually evidence, like in bats, for example, that there's temporal codes, so timing codes of like exactly when particular neurons fire is the mechanism of information representation. But at least in the motor cortex, there's a substantial evidence that it's rate coding, or at least one like first order effect is that it's rate coding. So then if the brain is representing information by changing the sort of frequency of a neuron firing, what really matters is sort of the delta between sort of the baseline state of the neuron and what it looks like when it's modulated. And what we've observed, and what has also been observed in academic work, is that baseline rate, sort of if you're to tar the scale, if you imagine that analogy for like measuring, flour or something when you're baking, that baseline state of how much the pot weighs is actually different day to day. And so if what you're trying to measure is how much rice is in the pot, you're going to get a different measurement different days because you're measuring with different pots. So that baseline rate shifting is really the thing that, at least from a first order description of the problem, is what's causing this downstream bias. There can be other effects, nonlinear effects on top of that, but at least at a very first order description of the problem, that's what we observe day to day, is that the baseline firing rate of any particular neuron or observed on a particular channel is changing.
So can you just adjust to the baseline to make it relative to the baseline nonstop?
Yeah, this is a great question. So with monkeys, we have found various ways to do this. One example way to do this is you ask them to do some behavioral task, like play the game with a joystick. You measure what's going on in the brain. You compute some mean of what's going on across all the input features, and you subtract that in the input when you're doing your BCI session. Works super well. For whatever reason, that doesn't work super well with Nolan. I actually don't know the full reason why, but I can imagine several explanations. One such explanation could be that the context effect difference between some open loop task and some closed loop task is much more significant with Nolan than it is with a monkey. Maybe in this open loop task, he's watching the Lex Fridman podcast while he's doing the task, or he's whistling and listening to music and talking with his friend and asking his mom what's for dinner while he's doing this task. And so the exact sort of difference in context between those two states may be much larger and thus lead to a bigger sort of generalization gap between the features that you're normalizing at sort of open loop time and what you're trying to use at closed loop time.
That's interesting. Just on that point, it's kind of incredible to watch Nolan be able to do to multitask, to do multiple tasks at the same time, to be able to move the mouse cursor effectively while talking and while being nervous because he's talking in front
kicking
of
my ass in chess too,
kicking your ass and not worry and talk trash while doing it.
Yes.
So all at the same time. And yes, if you're trying to normalize to the baseline, that might throw everything off. Boy, is that interesting.
Maybe one comment on that too. For folks that aren't familiar with assistive technology, I think there's a common belief that, well, why can't you just use an eye tracker or something like this for helping somebody move a mouse on the screen? And it's really a fair question, and one that I actually was not confident before sort of Nolan that this was going to be a profoundly transformative technology for people like him. And I'm very confident now that it will be, but the reasons are subtle. It really has to do with ergonomically how it fits into their life. Even if you can just offer the same level of control as what they would have with an eye tracker or with a mouse stick, but you don't need to have that thing in your face. You don't need to be positioned in a certain way. You don't need your caretaker to be around to set it up for you. You can activate it when you want, how you want, wherever you want. That level of independence is so game-changing for people. It means that they can text a friend at night privately without their mom needing to be in the loop. It means that they can open up, and browse the internet at 2 a.m. when nobody's around to set their iPad up for them. This is a profoundly game-changing thing for folks in that situation. And this is even before we start talking about folks that, may not be able to communicate at all or ask for help when they want to. This can be potentially the only link that they have to the outside world. And that one doesn't, I think, need explanation of why that's so impactful.
You mentioned neural decoder. how much machine learning is in the decoder? How much magic? How much science? How much art? How difficult is it to come up with a decoder that figures out what these sequence of spikes mean?
Yeah, good question. There's a couple different ways to answer this. So maybe I'll zoom out briefly first, and then I'll go down one of the rabbit holes. So the zoomed out view is that building the decoder is really the process of building the data set plus compiling it into the weights. And each of those steps is important. The direction, I think, of further improvement is primarily going to be in the data set side of how do you construct the optimal labels for the model. But there's an entirely separate challenge of then how do you compile it into the best model. And so I'll go briefly down the second rabbit hole. One of the main challenges with designing the optimal model for BCI is that offline metrics don't necessarily correspond to online metrics.
Mm-hmm.
It's fundamentally a control problem. The user is trying to control something on the screen, and the exact sort of user experience of how you output the intention impacts their ability to control. So, for example, if you just look at validation loss as predicted by your model, there can be multiple ways to achieve the same validation loss. Not all of them are equally controllable by the end user. And so it might be as simple as saying, oh, you could just add auxiliary loss terms that like help you capture the thing that actually matters. But this is a very complex, nuanced process. So how you turn the labels into the model is more of a nuanced process than just like a standard supervised learning problem. One very fascinating anecdote here, we've tried many different sort of neural network architectures that translate brain data to velocity outputs, for example. And one example that's stuck in my brain from a couple of years ago now is at one point we were using just fully connected networks to decode the brain activity. We tried an A/B test where we were measuring the relative performance in online control sessions of sort of 1D convolution over the input signal. So if you imagine per channel, you have a sliding window that's producing some convolve feature for each of those input sequences for every single channel simultaneously. You can actually get better validation metrics, meaning you're fitting the data better and it's generalizing better in offline data if you use this convolutional architecture. You're reducing parameters. It's sort of a standard procedure when you're dealing with time series data. Now, it turns out that when using that model online, the controllability was worse, was far worse, even though the offline metrics were better. And there can be many ways to interpret that, but what that taught me at least was that, hey, it's at least the case right now that if you were to just throw a bunch of compute at this problem, and you were trying to sort of hyperparameter optimize or, let some GPT model hard code or come up with or invent many different solutions, if you were just optimizing for loss, it would not be sufficient, which means that there's still some inherent modeling gap here. There's still some artistry left to be uncovered here of how to get your model to scale with more compute. And that may be fundamentally a labeling problem, but there may be other components to this as well.
Is it data constraint at this time? Which is what it sounds like. Like, how do you get a lot of good labels?
Yeah, I think it's data quality constrained, not necessarily data quantity constrained.
But even just the quantity, I mean, because it has to be trained on the interactions. I guess there's not that many interactions.
Yeah, so it depends what version of this you're talking about. So if you're talking about, let's say the simplest example of just 2D velocity, then I think, data quality is the main thing. If you're talking about how to build a sort of multifunction output that lets you do all the inputs to the computer that you and I can do, then it's actually a much more sophisticated, nuanced modeling challenge, because now you need to think about not just when the user is left-clicking, but when you're building the left-click model, you also need to be thinking about how to make sure it doesn't fire when they're trying to right-click or when they're trying to move the mouse. So one example of an interesting bug from like sort of week one of BCI with Nolan was when he moved the mouse, the click signal sort of dropped off a cliff, and when he stopped, the click signal went up. So again, there's a contamination between the two inputs. Another good example was at one point he was trying to do sort of a left click and drag. And the minute he started moving, the left click signal dropped off a cliff. So again, because there's some contamination between the two signals, you need to come up with some way to either in the data set or in the model, build robustness against this kind of, you think of it like overfitting, but really it's just that the model has not seen this kind of variability before. So you need to find some way to help the model with that.
This is super cool because it feels like all of this is very solvable, but it's hard.
Yes, it is fundamentally an engineering challenge. This is important to emphasize. And it's also important to emphasize that it may not need fundamentally new techniques, which means that people who work on, let's say, unsupervised speech classification using CTC loss, for example, with internal to Siri, they could potentially have very applicable skills to this.
So what things are you excited about in the future development? of the software stack on the Neuralink. So everything we've been talking about, the decoding, the UX.
I think there's some I'm excited about, like something I'm excited about from the technology side, and some I'm excited about for understanding how this technology is going to be best situated for entering the world. So I'll work backwards. On the technology entering the world side of things, I'm really excited to understand how this device works for folks that cannot speak at all, that have no ability to sort of bootstrap themselves into useful control by voice command, for example, and are extremely limited in their current capabilities. I think that will be an incredibly useful signal for us to understand, really what is an existential threat for all startups, which is product market fit. Does this device have the capacity and potential to transform people's lives in the current state? And if not, what are the gaps? And if there are gaps, how do we solve them most efficiently? So that's what I'm very excited about for the next sort of year or so of clinical trial operations. On the technology side, I'm quite excited about basically everything we're doing. I think it's going to be awesome. The most prominent one I would say is scaling channel count. So right now we have a 1,000 channel device. The next version will have between 3,000 and 6,000 channels, and I would expect that curve to continue in the future. And it's unclear what set of problems will just disappear completely at that scale, and what set of problems will remain and require further focus. And so I'm excited about the clarity of gradient that gives us in terms of the user experiences we choose to focus our time and resources on, and also in terms of the even things as simple as non-stationarity. Like, does that problem just completely go away at that scale? Or do we need to come up with new creative UXs still, even at that point? And also, when we get to that time point, when we start expanding out dramatically the set of functions that you can output from one brain, how to deal with all the nuances of both the user experience of not being able to feel the different keys under your fingertips, but still needing to be able to modulate all of them in synchrony to achieve the thing you want. Mm-hmm. And again, you don't have that proprioceptive feedback loop, so how can you make that intuitive for a user to control a high-dimensional control surface without feeling the thing physically? I think that's going to be a super interesting problem. I'm also quite excited to understand, do these scaling laws continue? Like, as you scale channel count, how much further out do you go before that saturation point is truly hit? And it's not obvious today. I think we only know what's in the sort of interpolation space. We only know what's between 0 and 1024, but we don't know what's beyond that. And then there's a whole sort of like range of interesting sort of neuroscience and brain questions, which is when you stick more stuff in the brain in more places, you get to learn much more quickly about what those brain regions represent. And so I'm excited about that fundamental neuroscience learning, which is also important for figuring out how to most efficiently insert electrodes in the future. So yeah, I think all those dimensions I'm really, really excited about. And that doesn't even get close to touching the sort of software stack that we work on every single day and what we're working on right now.
Yeah, it seems virtually impossible to me that 1,000 electrodes is where it saturates. It feels like this would be one of those silly notions in the future where obviously you should have millions of electrodes, and this is where like the true breakthroughs happen.
Yep.
You tweeted,
"Oh,
some thoughts are most precisely described in poetry." Why do you think that is?
I think it's because the information bottleneck of language is pretty steep, and yet you're able to reconstruct in the other person's brain more effectively without being literal. Like if you can express a sentiment such that in their brain they can reconstruct the actual true underlying meaning and beauty of the thing that you're trying to get across, the generator function in their brain is more powerful than what language can express. And so the mechanism of poetry is really just to feed or seed that generator function.
So being literal sometimes is a suboptimal compression for the thing you're trying to convey.
And it's actually in the process of the user going through that generation that they understand what you mean. Like that's the beautiful part. It's also like when you look at a beautiful painting, like it's not the pixels of the painting that are beautiful. It's the thought process that occurs when you see that, the experience of that actually is the thing that matters.
Yeah, it's resonating with some deep thing within you that the artist also experienced and was able to convey that through the pixels. Right. And that's actually going to be relevant for full-on telepathy. It's like if you just read the poetry literally, that doesn't say much of anything interesting. It requires a human to interpret it. So it's the combination of the human mind and all the experiences the human being has within the context of the collective intelligence of the human species that makes that poem make sense. And they load that in. And so in that same way, the signal that carries from human to human meaning may seem trivial, but may actually carry a lot of power uh, because of the complexity of the human mind on the receiving end. Yeah, that's interesting. Poetry still doesn't. Who was it? I think Yoshibaku first partial. I said something about all the people that think we've achieved AGI explain why humans like music.
Oh yeah,
and until the AGI likes music, you haven't achieved AGI or something like.
Do you not think that's like some next token entropy surprise kind of thing going on there?
I don't know.
I don't know either. I listen to a lot of classical music and also read a lot of poetry, and yeah, I do wonder if like there is some element of the next token surprise factor going on there.
Yeah, maybe.
Because I mean, like a lot of the tricks in both poetry and music are like basically you have some repeated structure and then you do like a twist.
Yeah.
Like it's like, okay, verse or like clause 1, 2, 3 is one thing, and then clause 4 is like, okay, now we're on to the next theme.
Yeah.
And they kind of play with exactly when the surprise happens and the expectation of the user. And that's even true like through history as musicians evolve music, they take like some known structure that people are familiar with and they just tweak it a little bit. Like they tweak it and add a surprising element. This is especially true in classical music heritage. But that's what I'm wondering. Like, is it all just entropy? Like
so breaking structure or breaking symmetry is something that humans seem to like. Maybe as simple as that.
Yeah, and I mean, great artists copy, and they also, knowing which rules to break is the important part. And that fundamentally, it must be about the listener of the piece. Like, which rule is the right one to break? It's about the user or the audience member perceiving that as interesting.
What do you think is the meaning of human existence?
There's a TV show I really like called The West Wing. And in The West Wing, there's a character, he's the president of the United States, who's having a discussion about the Bible with one of their colleagues. And the colleague says something about, the Bible says X, Y, and Z. And the president says, yeah, but it also says A, B, C. And the person says, do you believe the Bible to be literally true? And the president says, yes, but I also think that neither of us are smart enough to understand it. I think to like the analogy here for the meaning of life is that largely we don't know the right question to ask. And so I think I'm very aligned with sort of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy version of this question, which is basically if we can ask the right questions, it's much more likely we find the meaning of human existence. And so in the short term, as a heuristic in the sort of search policy space, we should try to increase the diversity of people asking such questions, or generally of consciousness and conscious beings asking such questions. So again, I think I will take the I don't know card here, but say I do think there are meaningful things we can do that improve the likelihood of answering that question.
It's interesting how much value you assign to the task of asking the right questions. That's the main thing, is not the answers, is the questions.
This point, by the way, is driven home in a very painful way when you try to communicate with someone who cannot speak. Because a lot of the time, the last thing to go is they have the ability to somehow, wiggle a lip or move something that allows them to say yes or no. And in that situation, it's very obvious that what matters is, are you asking them the right question to be able to say yes or no to?
Wow, that's powerful. Well, Bliss, thank you for everything you do. And thank you for being you. And thank you for talking today.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this conversation with Bliss Chapman. And now, dear friends, here's Nolan Arbaugh, the first human being to have a Neuralink device implanted in his brain. You had a diving accident in 2016 that left you paralyzed with no feeling from the shoulders down. How did that accident change your life?
It was sort of a freak thing that happened. Imagine you're running into the ocean. Although this is a lake, but you're running into the ocean and you get to about waist high, and then you kind of like dive in, take the rest of the plunge under the wave or something. That's what I did. And then I just never came back up. Not sure what happened. I did it running into the water with a couple of guys. And so my idea of what happened is really just that I took like a stray fist, elbow, knee, foot, something to the side of my head. The left side of my head was sore for about a month afterwards. So must have taken a pretty big knock. And then they both came up and I didn't. And so I was face down in the water for a while. I was conscious. And then eventually just, realized I couldn't hold my breath any longer. And I keep saying took a big drink. People, I don't know if they like that I say that. It seems like I'm making light of it all, but this is kind of how I am. And I don't know, like I'm a very relaxed, sort of stress-free person. I rolled with the punches for a lot of this. I kind of took it in stride. It's like, all right, well, what can I do next? How can I improve my life even a little bit? On a day-to-day basis at first, just trying to find some way to heal as much of my body as possible. To try to get healed, to try to get off a ventilator, learn as much as I could so I could somehow survive once I left the hospital. And then thank God I had like my family around me. If I didn't have my parents, my siblings, then I would have never made it this far. They've done so much for me, more than like I can ever thank them for, honestly. And a lot of people don't have that. A lot of people in my situation, their families either aren't capable of providing for them or honestly just don't want to. And so they get placed somewhere and, in some sort of home. So thankfully I had my family. I have a great group of friends, a great group of buddies from college who have all rallied around me, and we're all still incredibly close. People always say, if you're lucky, you'll end up with one or two friends from high school that you keep throughout your life. I have about 10 or 12 from high school that have all stuck around, and we still get together, all of us, twice a year. We call it the spring series and the fall series. This last one we all did, we dressed up like X-Men. So I did a Professor Xavier, and it was freaking awesome. It was so good. So yeah, I have such a great support system around me. And so, being a quadriplegic isn't that bad. I get waited on all the time. People bring me food and drinks, and I get to sit around and watch as much TV and movies and anime as I want. I get to read as much as I want. I mean, it's great.
It's beautiful to see that you see the silver lining in all of this. But just going back, do you remember the moment when you first realized you're paralyzed from the neck down?
Yep. I was face down in the water. Right when something hit my head, I tried to get up and I realized I couldn't move, and it just sort of clicked. I'm like, all right, I'm paralyzed, can't move. What do I do? If I can't get up, I can't flip over, can't do anything, then I'm going to drown eventually. And I knew I couldn't hold my breath forever. So I just held my breath and thought about it for maybe 10, 15 seconds. I've heard from other people that, like onlookers, I guess, the two girls that pulled me out of the water were two of my best friends. They are lifeguards. And one of them said that it looked like my body was sort of shaking in the water, like I was trying to flip over and stuff. But I knew immediately. And I just I realized that that's like what my situation was from here on out. Maybe if I got to the hospital, they'd be able to do something. When I was in the hospital, like right before surgery, I was trying to calm one of my friends down. I had like brought her with me from college to camp, and she was just bawling over me, and I was like, hey, it's gonna be fine, like don't worry. I was cracking some jokes to try to lighten the mood. The nurse had called my mom, and I was like, don't tell my mom. She's just gonna be stressed out. Call her after I'm out of surgery, because at least she'll have some answers then, like whether I live or not, really. And I didn't want her to be stressed through the whole thing, but I knew. And then when I first woke up after surgery, I was super drugged up. They had me on fentanyl like 3 ways, which was awesome. I don't recommend it, but I saw some crazy stuff on that fentanyl, and it was still the best I've ever felt on drugs. Medication. Sorry, on medication. And I remember the first time I saw my mom in the hospital, I was just bawling. I had like ventilator in, like I couldn't talk or anything. And I just started crying because it was more like seeing her. Not that, I mean, the whole situation obviously was pretty rough, but it was just like seeing her face for the first time was pretty hard. But yeah, I never had like a moment of, man, I'm paralyzed. This sucks. I don't want to like be around anymore. It was always just, I hate that I have to do this, but like sitting here and wallowing isn't going to help.
So immediate acceptance.
Yeah. Yeah.
Has there been low points along the way?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there are days when I don't really feel like doing anything. Not so much anymore. Like not for the last couple years. I don't really feel that way. I've more so just wanted to try to do anything possible to make my life better at this point. But at the beginning, there were some ups and downs. There were some really hard things to adjust to. First off, just like the first couple months, the amount of pain I was in was really, really hard. I mean, I remember screaming at the top of my lungs in the hospital because I thought my legs were on fire. And obviously, I can't feel anything, but it's all nerve pain. And so that was a really hard night. I asked them to give me as much pain meds as possible. They're like, you've had as much as you can have, so just kind of deal with it. Go to a happy place, sort of thing. So that was a pretty low point. And then every now and again, it's hard, like realizing things that I wanted to do in my life that I won't be able to do anymore. I always wanted to be a husband and father, and I just don't think that I could do it now as a quadriplegic. Maybe it's possible, but I'm not sure I would ever put someone I love through that, like having to take care of me and stuff. Not being able to go out and play sports. I was a huge athlete growing up, so that was pretty hard. Just little things too, when I realized I can't do them anymore. Like there's something really special about being able to hold a book and smell a book, like the feel, the texture, the smell, like as you turn the pages, like I just love it. I can't do it anymore. And it's little things like that. The 2-year mark was pretty rough. 2 years is when they say you will get back basically as much as you're ever going to get back as far as movement and sensation goes. And so for the first 2 years, that was the only thing on my mind, was like try as much as I can to move my fingers, my hands, my feet, everything possible to try to get sensation and movement back. And then when the 2-year mark hit, so June 30th, 2018, I was really sad that that's kind of where I was. And then just randomly here and there, but I was never like depressed for long periods of time. Just it never seemed worthwhile to me.
What gave you strength?
My faith in God was a big one. My understanding that it was all for a purpose, and even if that purpose wasn't anything involving Neuralink, even if that purpose was, there's a story in the Bible about Job, and I think it's a really, really popular story about how Job, has all of these terrible things happen to him, and he praises God throughout the whole situation. I thought, and I think a lot of people think for most of their lives, that they are Job, that they're the ones going through something terrible, and they just need to, praise God through the whole thing, and everything will work out. At some point after my accident, I realized that I might not be Job, that I might be, one of his children that gets killed or kidnapped or taken from him. And so it's about terrible things that happen to those around you who you love. So maybe, in this case, my mom would be Job, and she has to get through something extraordinarily hard. And I just need to try and make it as best as possible for her, because she's the one that's really going through this massive trial. And that gave me a lot of strength. And obviously my family and my friends, they give me all the strength that I need on a day-to-day basis. So it makes things a lot easier having that great support system around me.
From everything I've seen of you online, your streams, and the way you are today, I really admire, let's say, your unwavering positive outlook on life. Has that always been this way?
Yeah. I've just always thought I could do anything I ever wanted to do. There was never anything too big. Like whatever I set my mind to, I felt like I could do it. I didn't want to do a lot. I wanted to like travel around and be sort of like a gypsy and like go work odd jobs. I had this dream of traveling around Europe and being like, I don't know, a shepherd in like Wales or Ireland, and then going and being a fisherman in Italy, doing all of these things for like a year. Like it's such like cliche things, but I just thought it would be so much fun to go and travel and do different things. And so I've always just seen the best in people around me too. And I've always tried to be good to people. And growing up with my mom too, she's like the most positive, energetic person in the world. And we're all just people. Like, I just get along great with people. I really enjoy meeting new people. And so, I just wanted to do everything. This is just kind of just how I've been.
It's just great to see that cynicism didn't take over, given everything you've been through.
Yeah.
That's was that like a deliberate choice you made that you're not going to let this keep you down?
Yeah, a bit. Also, like it's just kind of how I am. I just, like I said, I roll with the punches with everything. I always used to tell people, like, I don't stress about things much. And whenever I'd see people getting stressed, I would just say, like, it's not hard. Just don't stress about it. And like, that's all you need to do. And they're like, that's not how that works. I'm like, it works for me. Like, just don't stress and everything will be fine. Like, everything will work out. Obviously, not everything always goes well, and it's not like it all works out for the best all the time, but I just don't think stress has had any place in my life since I was a kid.
What was the experience like of you being selected to be the first human being to have a Neuralink device implanted in your brain? Were you scared? Excited?
No, it was cool. um like I was I was never afraid of it. I had to think through a lot. Should I do this? Like be the first person? I could wait until number 2 or 3 and get a better version of the Neuralink. Like the first one might not work. Maybe it's actually gonna kind of suck. It's going to be the worst version ever in a person. So why would I do the first one? Like I've already kind of been selected. I could just tell them, like, okay, find someone else and then I'll do number 2 or 3. Like I'm sure they would let me. They're looking for a few people anyways. But ultimately I was like, I don't know, there's something about being the first one to do something. It's pretty cool. I always thought that if I had the chance that I would like to do something for the first time, this seemed like a pretty good opportunity. And I was never scared. I think my like faith had a huge part in that. I always felt like God was preparing me for something. I almost wish it wasn't this, because I had many conversations with God about not wanting to do any of this as a quadriplegic. I told him, I'll go out and talk to people. I'll go out and travel the world and talk to, stadiums, thousands of people, give my testimony. I'll do all of it, but like heal me first. Don't make me do all of this in a chair. That sucks. Um, and I guess he won that argument. I didn't really have much of a choice. I always felt like there was something going on. And to see how, I guess, easily I made it through the interview process and how quickly everything happened, how the stars sort of aligned with all of this, it it just told me, like as the surgery was getting closer, it just told me that, it was all meant to happen. It was all meant to be. And so I shouldn't be afraid of anything that's to come. And so I wasn't. I kept telling myself, like, you say that now, but as soon as the surgery comes, you're probably going to be freaking out. Like, you're about to have brain surgery, and brain surgery is a big deal for a lot of people, but it's a even bigger deal for me. Like, it's all I have left. The amount of times I've been like, thank you, God, that you didn't take my brain and my personality and my ability to think, my like love of learning, like my character, everything. Like, thank you so much. Like, as long as you left me that, then I think I can get by. And I was about to let people go, like, root around in there, like, hey, we're gonna go like put some stuff in your brain, like hopefully it works out. And so it was something that gave me pause. But like I said, how smoothly everything went, I never expected for a second that anything would go wrong. Plus, the more people I met on the Barrows side and on the Neuralink side, they're just the most impressive people in the world. Like, I can't speak enough to how much I trust these people with my life and how impressed I am with all of them. And to see the excitement on their faces, to like walk into a room and roll into a room and see all of these people looking at me like we're so excited, like we've been working so hard on this and it's finally happening. It's super infectious, and it just makes me want to do it even more and to help them achieve their dreams. Like, I don't know, it's so rewarding, and I'm so happy for all of them, honestly.
What was the day of surgery like? What's when did you wake up? What did you feel?
Yeah.
Minute by minute.
Yeah.
Were you freaking out?
No. I thought I was going to, but as surgery approached the night before, the morning of, I was just excited. Like, I was like, let's make this happen. I think I said that, something like that to Elon on the phone. Beforehand, we were like FaceTiming, and I was like, let's rock and roll. And he's like, let's do it. I don't know. I wasn't scared. So we woke up. I think we had to be at the hospital at like 5:30 a.m. I think surgery was at like 7 a.m. So we woke up pretty early. I'm not sure much of us slept that night. Um, um, got to the hospital 5:30, went through like all the pre-op stuff. Everyone was super nice. Elon was supposed to be there in the morning, but something went wrong with his plane, so we ended up FaceTiming. That was cool. Had one of the greatest one-liners of my life after that phone call. Hung up with him. There were like 20 people around me, and I was like, I just hope he wasn't too starstruck talking to me.
Nice.
And yeah,
Well
it was
done.
good.
Well done.
Yeah.
Did you write that ahead of time?
No,
or it just came to you?
it just came to me. I was like, this seems right, you know? Went into surgery. I asked if I could pray right beforehand, so I like prayed over the room. I asked God if he would like be with my mom in case anything happened to me, and just to like calm her nerves out there. Woke up and played a bit of a prank on my mom. I don't know if you've heard about it.
Yeah, I read about it.
Yeah, she was not happy.
Can you take me through the prank? And,
yeah, this is
do
something.
you regret doing that now?
No, no, not one bit. It was something I had talked about ahead of time with my buddy Bane. I was like, I would really like to play a prank on my mom. Very specifically my mom. She's very gullible. I think she had knee surgery once even, and after she came out of knee surgery, she was super groggy. She's like, I can't feel my legs. And my dad looked at her. He was like, you don't have any legs. Like they had to amputate both your legs.
Oh,
and we just do very mean things to her all the time.
Yes.
I'm so surprised that she still loves us. But right after surgery, I was really worried that I was going to be too like groggy, like not all there. I had anesthesia once before, and it messed me up. Like, I could not function for a while afterwards, and I like said a lot of things that I was really worried that I was going to start, I don't know, like dropping some bombs, and I wouldn't even know, I wouldn't remember. So I was like, please God, don't let that happen. And please let me be there enough to do this to my mom. And so she walked in after surgery. It was like the first time they had been able to see me after surgery, and she just looked at me. She said, "Hi, like, how are you? How are you doing? How do you feel?" And I looked at her, and just this very, I think the anesthesia helped, very like groggy, sort of confused look on my face. It's like, who are you? And she just started looking around the room, like at the surgeons, at the doctors, like, "What did you do to my son? Like, you need to fix this right now." Tears started streaming. I saw how much she was freaking out. I was like, I can't let this go on. And so I was like, Mom, I'm fine. Like, it's all right. And still, she was not happy about it. She still says she's going to get me back someday, but I mean, I don't know. I don't know what that's going to look like.
It's a lifelong battle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was good.
In some sense, it was a demonstration that you still got.
That's all I wanted it to be. Humor. That's all I wanted it to be. And I knew that doing something super mean to her like that would show her.
Actually, a way, yeah, to show that you're still there, that you love her.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a dark way to do it, but I love it.
Yeah.
What was the first time you were able to feel that you can use the Neuralink device to affect the world around you?
Yeah. The first little taste I got of it was actually not too long after surgery. Some of the Neuralink team had brought in like a little iPad, a little tablet screen, and they had put up 8 different channels and that were recording some of my neuron spikes. And they put it in front of me. They're like, "This is like real time, your brain firing." I was like, "That's super cool." My first thought was, I mean, if they're firing now, let's see if I can affect them in some way. So I started trying to like wiggle my fingers, and I just started like scanning through the channels. And one of the things I was doing was like moving my index finger up and down. And I just saw this yellow spike on like top row, like 3rd box over or something. I saw this yellow spike every time I did it. And I was like, "Oh, that's cool." And everyone around me was just like, what are you seeing?" I was like, look at this one. Look at like this top row, 3rd box over, this yellow spike. Like, that's me right there. And everyone was freaking out. They started like clapping. Mm-hmm. I was like, that's super unnecessary. Like this is what's supposed to happen, right? Like,
so you're imagining yourself moving each individual finger one at a time,
yeah,
and then seeing like that you can notice something, and then when you did the index finger, you're like, oh,
yeah, I was wiggling kind of all of my fingers to see if anything would happen. There was a lot of other things going on, but that big yellow spike was the one that stood out to me. Like, I'm sure that if I would have stared at it long enough, I could have mapped out maybe 100 different things, but the big yellow spike was the one that I noticed.
Maybe you could speak to what it's like to sort of wiggle your fingers, to like to imagine that the mental, the cognitive effort required to sort of wiggle your index finger, for example. How easy is that to do?
Pretty easy for me. It's something that at the very beginning after my accident, they told me to try and move my body as much as possible, even if, you know, you can't. Just keep trying, because that's going to create new like neural pathways or pathways in my spinal cord to like reconnect these things to hopefully regain some movement someday.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, I know it's bizarre, but
so that's part of the recovery process, is to keep trying to move your body.
Yep.
And
that's as much as you can.
And the nervous system does its thing. It starts reconnecting.
It'll start reconnecting. For some people. Some people it never works. Some people they'll do it. Like for me, I got some bicep control back. And that's about it. I can, if I try enough, I can wiggle some of my fingers. Not like on command. It's more like if I try to move, say, my right pinky, and I just keep trying to move it, after a few seconds, it'll wiggle. So I know there's stuff there. Like I know, like, and that happens with, you know, a few different of my fingers and stuff. But yeah, that's what they tell you to do. One of the people at the time when I was in the hospital came in and told me, for one guy who had recovered most of his control, what he thought about every day was actually walking, like the act of walking, just over and over again. So I tried that for years. I tried just imagining walking, which is, it's hard. It's hard to imagine like all of the steps that go into, well, taking a step, like all of the things that have to move, like all of the activations that have to happen along your leg in order for one step to occur.
But you're not just imagining, you're like doing it, right?
I'm trying, yeah.
Right.
So it's like, it's imagining over again what I had to do to take a step, because it's not something any of us think about. You want to walk and you take a step. You don't think about all of the different things that are going on in your body. So I had to recreate that in my head as much as I could, and then I practice it over and over and over.
So it's not like a third person perspective, it's a first person perspective. You're like, it's not like you're imagining yourself walking. You're like literally doing this, everything, all the same stuff as if you're walking.
Yeah. Which was hard. It was hard at the beginning.
Like frustrating hard, or like actually cognitively hard? Like which way?
It was both. There's a scene in one of the Kill Bill movies, actually, oddly enough, where she is like paralyzed. I don't know, from like a drug that was in her system, and then she like finds some way to get into the back of a truck or something, and she stares at her toe and she says, "Move, like move your big toe," and after a few seconds on screen, she does it, and she did that with every one of her like body parts until she can move again. I did that for years. Just stared at my body and said, "Move your index finger, move your big toe." Sometimes vocalizing it like out loud, sometimes just thinking it. I tried every different way to do this to try to get some movement back, and it's hard because it actually is like taxing, like physically taxing on my body, which is something I would have never expected, because it's not like I'm moving, but it feels like there's a buildup of, I don't know, the only way I can describe it is there are like signals that aren't getting through from my brain down, because there's that gap in my spinal cord. So brain down, and then from my hand back up to the brain. And so it feels like those signals get stuck in whatever body part that I'm trying to move, and they just build up and build up and build up until they burst. And then once they burst, I get like this really weird sensation of everything sort of like dissipating back out to level, and then I do it again. It's also just like a fatigue thing, like a muscle fatigue, but without actually moving your muscles. It's very, very bizarre. And then, if you try to stare at a body part or think about a body part and move for 2, 3, 4, sometimes 8 hours, it's very taxing on your mind. It takes a lot of focus. It was a lot easier at the beginning because I wasn't able to like control a TV in my room or anything. I wasn't able to control any of my environment. So for the first few years, a lot of what I was doing was staring at walls. And so obviously I did a lot of thinking, and I tried to move a lot, just over and over and over again.
So you never gave up sort of hope there?
No.
Just training hard, essentially.
Yep. And I still do it. I do it like subconsciously. And I think that that helped a lot with things with Neuralink, honestly. Yeah. It's something that I talked about the other day at the all hands that I did at Neuralink's Austin facility.
Welcome to Austin, by the way.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, man. I went to school.
Hat.
Hey, thanks, man. The Gigafactory was super cool. I went to school at Texas A&M, so I've been around before.
So you should be saying, "Welcome to me."
Yeah.
Welcome to Texas, Lex. Yeah, I get you.
But yeah, I was talking about how a lot of what they've had me do, especially at the beginning, well, I still do it now, is body mapping. So like there will be a visualization of a hand or an arm on the screen, and I have to do that motion. And that's how they sort of train the algorithm to like understand what I'm trying to do. And so it made things very seamless for me, I think.
That's really, really cool. So yeah. It's amazing to know, because I've learned a lot about the body mapping procedure.
Yeah.
With the interface and everything like that. It's cool to know that you've been essentially like training to be like world class at that task.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if other quadriplegics, like other paralyzed people, give up. I hope they don't. I hope they keep trying, because I've heard other paralyzed people say, like, don't ever stop. They tell you 2 years, but you just never know. You're the human body's capable of amazing things. So I've heard other people say don't give up. Like, I think one girl had spoken to me through some family members and said that she had been paralyzed, for 18 years, and she'd been trying to like wiggle her index finger for all that time, and she finally got it back like 18 years later. So like, I know that it's possible, and I'll never give up doing it. I do it when I'm lying down, like watching TV. I'll find myself doing it kind of just almost like on its own. It's just something I've gotten so used to doing that I don't know. I don't think I'll ever stop.
That's really awesome to hear, because I think it's one of those things that can really pay off in the long term. Because like it is training, you're not visibly seeing the results of that training at the moment, but like there's that like Olympic level nervous system getting ready for something.
Honestly, was like something that I think Neuralink gave me that I can't thank them enough for. Like, I can't show my appreciation for it enough. Was being able to visually see that what I'm doing is actually having some effect. It's a huge part of the reason why, like, I know now that I'm going to keep doing it forever. Because before Neuralink, I was doing it every day, and I was just assuming that things were happening. Like, it's not like I knew. I wasn't getting back any mobility or sensation or anything. So I could have been running up against a brick wall for all I knew. And with Neuralink, I get to see like all the signals happening real time. And I get to see that, what I'm doing can actually be mapped. When we started doing like click calibrations and stuff, when I go to click my index finger for a left click, that it actually recognizes that. Like, it changed how I think about what's possible with like retraining my body to move. And so yeah, I'll never give up now.
And also just the signal that there's still a powerhouse of a brain there that's like
exactly.
And as the technology develops, that brain is, that's the most important thing about the human body is the brain, and it can do a lot of the control. So what did it feel like when you first could wiggle the index finger and saw the environment respond, like that little thing where everybody was being way too dramatic according to you?
Yeah, it was very cool. It was cool, but I keep telling this to people, it made sense to me. Like, it made sense that, like, there are signals still happening in my brain, and that as long as you had something near it that could measure those, that could record those, then you should be able to like visualize it in some way, like see it happen. And so that was not very surprising to me. I was just like, oh, cool. Like, we found one, like we found something that works. It was cool to see that their technology worked, and that everything that they had worked so hard for was like going to pay off. But I hadn't like moved a cursor or anything at that point. I hadn't like interacted with a computer or anything at that point. So it just made sense. It was cool. Like I didn't really know much about BCI at that point either. So I didn't know like what sort of step this was actually making. Like, I didn't know if this was like a huge deal or if this was just like, okay, this is, it's cool that we got this far, but we're actually hoping for something like much better down the road. It's like, okay, I just thought that they knew that it turned on. So I was like, cool. Like, this is cool.
Well, did you like read up on the specs of the hardware you get installed, like the number of threads?
Yeah, I knew all of that, but it's all Greek to me. Like, I was like, okay, threads, 64 threads, 16 electrodes, 1024 channels. Okay. like that math checks out.
Sounds right.
Yeah.
When was the first time you were able to move a mouse cursor?
I know it must have been within the first maybe week or 2 weeks that I was able to like first move the cursor. And again, like, it kind of made sense to me. Like, it didn't seem like that big of a deal. Like, it was like, okay, well, how do I explain this. When everyone around you starts clapping for something that you've done, it's easy to say, okay, like I did something cool. Yeah. Like that was impressive in some way. What exactly that meant, what it was, hadn't really like set in for me. So again, I knew that me trying to move a body part, and then that being mapped in some sort of like machine learning algorithm to be able to identify like my brain signals and then take that and give me cursor control. That all kind of made sense to me. I don't know like all the ins and outs of it, but I was like, there are still signals in my brain firing. They just can't get through because there's like a gap in my spinal cord. And so they can't get all the way down and back up, but they're still there. So when I moved the cursor for the first time, I was like, that's cool, but I expected that should happen. Like it made sense to me. When I moved the cursor for the first time, with just my mind without like physically trying to move. So I guess I can get into that just a little bit, like the difference between attempted movement and imagined movement.
Yeah, that's a fascinating difference.
Yeah.
From one to the other.
Yeah. So like attempted movement is me physically trying to attempt to move, say, my hand. I try to attempt to move my hand to the right, to the left, forward, and back. And that's all attempted. Attempt to, like lift my finger up and down, attempt to kick or something. I'm physically trying to do all of those things, even if you can't see it. Like this would be like me attempting to like shrug my shoulders or something. That's all attempted movement. That's what I was doing for the first couple of weeks when they were going to give me cursor control. When I was doing body mapping, it was attempt to do this, attempt to do that. When Near was telling me to like imagine doing it, it like kind of made sense to me, but it's not something that people practice. Like if you started school as a child and they said, okay, write your name with this pencil. And so you do that. Like, okay, now imagine writing your name with that pencil. Kids would think, I guess like that kind of makes sense. And they would do it. But that's not something we're taught. It's all like how to do things physically. We think about like thought experiments and things, but that's not like a physical action of doing things. It's more like what you would do in certain situations. So imagine movement, it never really connected with me. Like, I guess you could maybe describe it as like a professional athlete, like swinging a baseball bat or swinging like a golf club. Like imagine what you're supposed to do, but then you go right to that and physically do it. Like then you get a bat in your hand and then you do what you've been imagining. And so I don't have that like connection. So telling me to imagine something versus attempting it, there wasn't a lot that I could do there mentally. I just kind of had to accept what was going on and try. But the attempted moving thing, it all made sense to me. Like if I try to move, then there's a signal being sent in my brain. And as long as they can pick that up, then they should be able to map it to what I'm trying to do. And so when I first moved the cursor like that, it was just like, yes, this should happen. Like I'm not surprised by that.
But can you clarify, is there supposed to be a difference between imagined movement and attempted movement?
Yeah, just that in imagined movement, you're not attempting to move at all. So
you're like visualizing yourself doing it, and then theoretically, is that supposed to be a different part of the brain that lights up in those two different situations?
Yeah, not necessarily. I think all these signals can still be represented in motor cortex, but the difference I think has to do with the naturalness of imagining something versus attempting it, and sort of the fatigue of that over time.
And by the way, on the mic is Bliss. So like this is just different ways to prompt you to kind of get to the thing that you arrived at.
Yeah.
Attempted movement does sound like the right thing to try.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense to me.
Because imagine for me, I would start visualizing, like in my mind, visualizing. Attempted, I would actually start trying to like.
Yeah.
I did like combat sports my whole life, like wrestling. When I'm imagining a move, See, I'm like moving my muscle.
Exactly.
Like there is a bit of an activation almost versus like visualizing yourself like a picture doing it.
Yeah, it's something that I feel like naturally anyone would do. If you try to tell someone to imagine doing something, they might close their eyes and then start physically doing it. But it's just
didn't click.
Yeah, it's hard. It was very hard at the beginning,
but attempted worked.
Attempted worked. It worked just like it should work, like a charm.
I remember there was like one Tuesday we were messing around, and I forget what swear word you used, but there was a swear word that came out of your mouth when you figured out you could just do the direct cursor control.
Yeah, that's it. It blew my mind. Like, no pun intended. Blew my mind when I first moved the cursor just with my thoughts and not attempting to move. It's something that I found like over the couple of weeks, like building up to that, that as I get better cursor controls, like the model gets better, then it gets easier for me to like I don't have to attempt as much to move it. And part of that is something that I'd even talked with them about when I was watching the signals of my brain one day. I was watching when I like attempted to move to the right, and I watched the screen as like I saw the spikes. Like I was seeing the spike, the signal was being sent before I was actually attempting to move. I imagine just because, you know, when you go to say move your hand or any body part, that signal gets sent before you're actually moving, has to make it all the way down and back up before you actually do any sort of movement. So there's a delay there. And I noticed that there was something going on in my brain before I was actually attempting to move, that my brain was like anticipating what I wanted to do. And that all started sort of, I don't know, like percolating in my brain. Like it was just sort of there, like always in the back. Like, that's so weird that it could do that. It kind of makes sense, but I wonder what that means as far as like using the Neuralink. And, you know, and then as I was playing around with the attempted movement and playing around with the cursor, and I saw that like as the cursor control got better, that it was anticipating my movements and what I wanted it to do, like cursor movements, what I wanted it to do a bit better and a bit better. And then one day I just randomly, as I was playing WebGrid, I like looked at a target before I had started like attempting to move. I was just trying to like get over, like train my eyes to start looking ahead, like, okay, this is the target I'm on, but if I look over here to this target, I know I can like maybe be a bit quicker getting there. And I looked over and the cursor just shot over. It was wild. Like I had to take a step back. Like I was like, this should not be happening. All day I was just smiling. I was so giddy. I was like, guys, do you know that this works? Like I can just think it and it happens. Which like they'd all been saying this entire time, like, I can't believe like you're doing all this with your mind. I'm like, yeah, but is it really with my mind? Like I'm attempting to move and it's just picking that up. So it doesn't feel like it's with my mind. But when I moved it for the first time like that, it was, oh man, it made me think that this technology, that what I'm doing is actually way more impressive than I ever thought. It was way cooler than I ever thought. And it just opened up a whole new world of possibilities of like what could possibly happen with this technology and what I might be able to be capable of with it.
Because you had felt for the first time like this was digital telepathy. Like you're controlling a digital device with your mind.
Yep.
I mean, that's a real moment of discovery. That's really cool. Like you've discovered something. I've seen like scientists talk about like a big aha moment, you know, like Nobel Prize winning. They'll have this like, holy crap.
Yeah.
Like
that's what it felt like. Like I didn't feel like I felt like I had discovered something, but for me, maybe not necessarily for like the world at large or like this field at large. It just felt like an aha moment for me. Like, oh, this works. Like obviously it works. And so that's what I do like all the time now. I kind of intermix the attempted movement and imagined movement. I do it all like together because I've found that there is some interplay with it that maximizes efficiency with the cursor. So it's not all like one or the other. It's not all just I only use attempted or I only use like imagined movements. It's more I use them in parallel, and I can do one or the other. I can just completely think about whatever I'm doing, but I don't know. I like to play around with it. I also like to just experiment with these things. Like every now and again, I'll get this idea in my head, like, I wonder if this works. And I'll just start doing it. And then afterwards, I'll tell them, by the way, I wasn't doing that like you guys wanted me to. I thought of something and I wanted to try it. And so I did. It seems like it works. So maybe we should like explore that a little bit.
So I think that discovery is not just for you, at least from my perspective. That's a discovery for everyone else who ever uses a Neuralink, that this is possible. Yeah. Like, I don't think that's an obvious thing that this is even possible. Mm-hmm. It's like, I was saying to Bliss earlier, it's like the 4-minute mile. People thought it was impossible to run a mile in 4 minutes. And once the first person did it, then everyone just started doing it. So like, just to show that it's possible, that paves the way to like anyone can now do it. That's a thing that's actually possible. Mm-hmm. You don't need to do the attempted movement. You can just go direct. Yeah. That's crazy.
It is crazy. It is crazy. Yeah.
For people who don't know, can you explain how the Link app works? You have an amazing stream on the topic. Your first stream, I think, on X, describing the app. Can you just describe how it works?
Yeah. So it's just an app that Neuralink created to help me interact with the computer. So on the Link app, there are a few different settings and different modes and things I can do on it. So there's like the body mapping, which we kind of touched on. There's a calibration. Calibration is how I actually get cursor control. So calibrating what's going on in my brain to translate that into cursor control. So it will pop out models. What they use, I think, is like time. So it would be, 5 minutes in calibration will give me so good of a model. And then if I'm in it for 10 minutes and 15 minutes, the models will progressively get better. And so, the longer I'm in it, generally, the better the models will get.
That's really cool because you often refer to the models. Yeah. So the model is the thing that's constructed once you go through the calibration step.
Yeah.
And then you also talked about sometimes you'll play like a really difficult game like Snake just to see how good the model is.
Yeah. So Snake is kind of like my litmus test for models. If I can control Snake decently well, then I know I have a pretty good model. So yeah, the Link app has all of those. It has WebGrid in it now. It's also how I like connect to the computer just in general. So they've given me a lot of like voice controls with it at this point. So I can, say like connect or implant disconnect. And as long as I have that charger handy, then I can connect to it. So the charger is also how I connect to the Link app to connect to the computer. I have to have the implant charger over my head when I want to connect to have it wake up because the implant's in hibernation mode, like always when I'm not using it. I think there's a setting to like wake it up every, so long. So we could set it to half an hour or 5 hours or something if I just want it to wake up periodically. So yeah, I'll like connect to the Link app and then go through all sorts of things, calibration for the day, maybe body mapping. I made them give me like a little homework tab because I am very forgetful and I forget to do things a lot. So I have like a lot of data collection things that they want me to do.
Is the body mapping part of the data collection or is that also part of the calibration?
Yeah, it is. It's something that they want me to do daily, which I've been slacking on because I've been doing so much media and traveling and so much. So I've been
super famous.
Yeah, I've been a terrible first candidate for how much I've been slacking on my homework. But yeah, it's just something that they want me to do every day to, track how well the Neuralink is performing over time and have something to give. I imagine to give to the FDA to create all sorts of fancy charts and stuff and show like, hey, this is what the Neuralink, this is how it's performing, day 1 versus day 90 versus day 180 and things like that.
What's the calibration step like? Is it like move left, move right?
It's a bubble game, so there will be like yellow bubbles that pop up on the screen. At first, it is open loop. So open loop, this is something that I still don't fully understand, the open loop and closed loop thing.
Me and Blitz talked for a long time about the difference between the two on the technical side.
Okay,
so it'd be great to hear your side of the story.
Open loop is basically I have no control over the cursor. The cursor will be moving on its own across the screen, and I am following by intention the cursor to different bubbles, and then the algorithm is training off of what like the signals it's getting are as I'm doing this. There are a couple different ways that they've done it. They call it center out target. So there will be a bubble in the middle and then 8 bubbles around that. And the cursor will go from the middle to one side. So say middle to left, back to middle to up to middle, like up right. And they'll do that all the way around the circle. And I will follow that cursor the whole time, and then it will train off of my intentions what it is expecting my intentions to be throughout the whole process.
Can you actually speak to when you say follow?
Yes.
You don't mean with your eyes, you mean with your intentions.
Yeah. So generally for calibration, I'm doing attempted movements because I think it works better. I think the better models as I progress through calibration make it easier to use imagine movements.
Wait. So calibrated on attempted movement will create a model that makes it really effective for you to then use the force.
Yes. I've tried doing calibration with imagined movement, and it just doesn't work as well for some reason. So that was the center out targets. There's also one where, a random target will pop up on the screen and it's the same. I just like move. I follow along with wherever the cursor is to that target all across the screen. I've tried those with imagined movement, and for some reason the models just don't they don't give as high level as quality when we get into closed loop. I haven't played around with it a ton, so maybe like the different ways that we're doing calibration now might make it a bit better. But what I've found is there will be a point in calibration where I can use imagine movement. Before that point, it doesn't really work. So if I do calibration for 45 minutes, the first 15 minutes, I can't use imagine movement. It just like doesn't work for some reason. And after a certain point, I can just sort of feel it. I can tell it moves different. That's the best way I can describe it. Like it's almost as if it is anticipating what I am going to do again before I go to do it. And so using attempted movement for 15 minutes, at some point I can kind of tell when I like move my eyes to the next target that the cursor is starting to like pick up, like it's starting to understand, it's learning like what I'm going to do.
So first of all, it's really cool that, you are a true pioneer in all of this. You're like exploring how to do every aspect of this most effectively. And there's just, I imagine so many lessons learned from this. So thank you for being a pioneer in all these kinds of different, like super technical ways. And it's also cool to hear that there's like a different like feeling to the experience when it's calibrated in different ways. Like just because I imagine your brain is doing something different. And that's why there's a different feeling to it. And then trying to find the words and the measurements to those feelings would be also interesting. But at the end of the day, you can also measure your actual performance on whether it's Snake or WebGrid. You can see like what actually works well. And you're saying for the open loop calibration, the attempted movement works best for now.
Yep.
So the open loop, you don't get the feedback that you did something.
Yeah.
Is that frustrating?
No, No, it makes sense to me. Like, we've done it with a cursor and without a cursor in open loop. So sometimes it's just, say for like the center out, the um, you'll start calibration with a bubble lighting up, and I push towards that bubble, and then when that bubble, when it's pushed towards that bubble for say 3 seconds, a bubble will pop, and then I come back to the middle. So I'm doing it all just by my intentions. Like that's what it's learning anyway. So it makes sense that as long as I follow what they want me to do, like follow the yellow brick road, that it'll all work out.
You're full of great references. Is the bubble game fun? Like,
yeah, they always feel so bad making me do calibration. Like, oh, we're about to do, a 40-minute calibration. I'm like, all right, like, do you guys want to do 2 of them? Like, I'm always asking to, like, whatever they need, I'm more than happy to do. And it's not bad. Like, I get to lie there and, or sit in my chair and like do these things with some great people. I get to have great conversations. I can give them feedback. I can talk about all sorts of things. I could throw something on my TV in the background and kind of like split my attention between them. Like it's not bad at all. I don't
is there a
mind
score that you get? Like, can you do
No.
better on the bubble game?
No, I would love that. I would love, yeah. I would
Writing
love
down
That's-
suggestions from Nolan.
That's
Make it more fun, gamified.
yeah, that's one thing that I really, really enjoy about WebGrid
Yeah.
is because I'm so competitive. Like the higher the BPS, the higher the score, I know the better I'm doing. And so if I think I've asked at one point one of the guys, like if he could give me some sort of numerical feedback for calibration, like I would like to know what they're looking at. Like, oh, it is, we see like this number while you're doing calibration. And that means, at least on our end, that we think calibration is going well. And I would love that because I would like to know if what I'm doing is going well or not. But then they've also told me like, yeah, not necessarily like 1-to-1. It doesn't actually mean that calibration is going well in some ways. So it's not like 100%, and they don't want to like skew what I'm experiencing or want me to change things based on that if that number isn't always accurate to like how the model will turn out or how like the end result. That's at least what I got from it. One thing I have asked them, and something that I really enjoy striving for, is towards the end of calibration, there is like a time between targets. And so I like to keep like at the end, that number as low as possible. So at the beginning, it can be, 4, 5, 6 seconds between me popping bubbles. But towards the end, I like to keep it below like 1.5, or if I could get it to like 1 second between like bubbles, because in my mind, that translates really nicely to something like WebGrid, where I know if I can hit a target 1 every second, that I'm doing real, real well.
There you go. That's the way to get a score on the calibrations, like the speed.
Yeah.
How quickly can you get from bubble to bubble?
Yeah.
So there's the open loop, and then it goes to the closed loop. And the closed loop can already start giving you a sense, because you're getting feedback of like how good the model is.
Yeah. So closed loop is when I first get cursor control, and how they've described it to me, someone who does not understand this stuff. I am the dumbest person in the room every time I'm with any of these guys.
Humility, I appreciate it.
Is that I am closing the loop. So I am actually now the one that is like finishing the loop of whatever this loop is. I don't even know what the loop is. They've never told me. They just say there is a loop, and at one point it's open and I can't control, and then I get control and it's closed. So I'm finishing the loop.
So how long the calibration usually take? You said like 10, 15 minutes.
Well, yeah, they're trying to get that number down pretty low. That's what we've been working on a lot recently, is getting that down as low as possible. So that way, if this is something that people need to do on a daily basis, or if some people need to do on a like every other day basis or once a week, they don't want people to be sitting in calibration for long periods of time. I think they wanted to get it down 7 minutes or below, at least where we're at right now. It'd be nice if you never had to do calibration. So we'll get there at some point, I'm sure, the more we learn about the brain. And like, I think that's, the dream. I think right now, for me to get like really, really good models, I'm in calibration 40 or 45 minutes. And I don't mind. Like I said, they always feel really bad, but if it's going to get me a model that can like break these records on WebGrid, I'll stay in it for flipping 2 hours.
Let's talk business. So WebGrid. I saw a presentation where Bliss said by March you selected 89,000 targets in WebGrid. Can you explain this game? What is WebGrid, and what does it take to be a world-class performer in WebGrid as you continue to break world records?
Yeah.
It's like a gold medalist talk. Well,
yeah, I'd like to thank exactly. everyone who's helped me get here, my coaches, my parents, for driving me to practice every day at 5 a.m. I'd like to thank God, and just overall my dedication to my craft.
The interviews with athletes are always like that exact. It's like that template. So WebGrid is a grid of cells.
It's literally just a grid. They can make it as big or small as you can make a grid. A single box on that grid will light up and you go and click it. And it is a way for them to benchmark how good a BCI is. So it's, pretty straightforward. You just click targets.
Only one blue cell appears and you're supposed to move the mouse to there and click on it.
So I like playing on like bigger grids because the bigger the grid, the like more BPS, it's bits per second that you get every time you click one. So I'll play on like a 35 by 35 grid, and then one of those little squares, cell, call it target, whatever, will light up and you move the cursor there and you click it, and then you do that forever.
And you've been able to achieve at first 8 bits per second, and you've recently broke that.
Yeah, I'm at 8.5 right now. I would have beaten that literally the day before I came to Austin, but I had like a 5-second lag right at the end, and I just had to wait until the latency calmed down, and then I kept clicking. But I was at like 8.01 and then 5 seconds of lag, and then the next like 3 targets I clicked all stayed at 8.01. So if I would have been able to click during that time of lag, I probably would have hit, I don't know, I might have hit 9. So I'm there. I'm really close. And then this whole Austin trip has really gotten in the way of my WebGrid playing ability.
It's frustrating.
Yeah.
So that's all you're thinking about right now?
Yeah, I know. I want to do better.
At 9.
I want to do better. I want to hit 9. I know 9 is very, very achievable. I'm right there. I think 10 I could hit maybe in the next month. Like I could do it probably in the next few weeks if I really push.
I think you and Elon are basically the same person, because last time I did a podcast with him, he came in extremely frustrated that he can't beat Uber Lilith as a droid. That was like a year ago, I think. Yeah. I forget, like solo.
Yeah.
And I could just tell there's some percentage of his brain the entire time was thinking like, I wish I was right now attempting.
Yeah. I think he did it that
night. Did it that night.
Yeah.
He stayed up and did it that night.
Yeah.
It's just crazy to me.
Yeah.
I mean, it's in a fundamental way, it's really inspiring. And what you're doing is inspiring in that way, because I mean, it's not just about the game. Everything you're doing there has impact. By striving to do well on WebGrid, you're helping everybody figure out how to create the system all along, like the decoding, the software, the hardware, the calibration, all of it, how to make all of that work so you can do everything else really well.
Yeah, it's just really fun.
Well, that's part of the thing, is like making it fun.
Yeah, it's addicting. I've joked about like what they actually did when they went in and put this thing in my brain. They must have flipped a switch to make me more susceptible to these kinds of games, to make me addicted to like WebGrid or something.
Yeah.
Do you know Bliss's high score?
Yeah, he said like 14 or something.
17.
Oh boy.
17.1 or something. 17.01.
17 on the dot. 17.01.
Yeah.
He told me he like does it on the floor with peanut butter and he like fasts. It's weird. It sounds like cheating. Sounds like performance enhancing.
Nolan, like the first time Nolan played this game, he asked, how good are we at this game? And I mean, I think you told me right then you're gonna try to beat me.
I'm gonna get there someday.
Yeah,
I think I
fully believe you.
I think I can.
I'm excited for that.
Yeah. So I've been playing first off with the dwell cursor, which really hampers my WebGrid playing ability. Basically, I have to wait 0.3 seconds for every click.
Oh, so you can't do the click. So you have to. So you click by dwelling. You said 0.3?
0.3 seconds, which sucks. It really slows down how much I'm able to, like, how high I'm able to get.
Yeah.
I still hit like 50. I think I hit like 50 something net trials per minute in that, which was pretty good. Because I'm able to, like, there's one of the settings is also like how slow you need to be moving in order to initiate a click, to start a click. So I can tell sort of when I'm on that threshold to start initiating a click just a bit early, so I'm not fully stopped over the target when I go to click. I'm doing it like on my way to the targets a little, to try to time it just right.
Wow. Yeah. So you're slowing down.
Yeah, just a hair right before the targets.
This is like elite performance. Okay, but that's still it sucks that there's a ceiling of the 0.3.
Well, I can get down to 0.2 and 0.1. 0.1's yeah, and I've played with that a little bit too. I have to adjust a ton of different parameters in order to play with 0.1, and I don't have control over all of that on my end yet. It also changes like how the models are trained. Like if I train a model, like in WebGrid, like I bootstrap on a model, which basically is them training models as I'm playing WebGrid, based off of like the WebGrid data that I'm. So like if I play WebGrid for 10 minutes, they can train off that data specifically, in order to get me a better model. If I do that with 0.3 versus 0.1, the models come out different. The way that they interact it's just much, much different. So I have to be really careful. I found that doing it with 0.3 is actually better in some ways, unless I can do it with 0.1 and change all of the different parameters. Then that's more ideal, because obviously 0.3 is faster than 0.1. So I could get there. I can get there.
Can you click using your brain?
For right now, it's the hover clicking with the dwell cursor. Before all the thread retraction stuff happened, we were calibrating clicks, left click, right click. That was my previous ceiling, before I broke the record again with the dwell cursor, was I think on a 35 by 35 grid with left and right click. And you get more BPS, more bits per second, using multiple clicks because it's more difficult.
Oh, because what is it? You're supposed to do either a left click or a right click.
Yes.
Is it different colors? Something like this?
Yeah, blue targets for left click, orange targets for right click is what they had done.
Got it.
So my previous record of 7.5
was with
the blue and the orange targets, yeah. Which I think if I went back to that now, doing the click calibration, I would be able to, and being able to like initiate clicks on my own, I think I would break that 10 ceiling like in a couple days max. Like,
yeah, you would start making Bliss nervous about his 17.
Why do you think we haven't given him the?
Yeah,
exactly. So what did it feel like with the retractions, that there is some of the threads retracted?
It sucked. It was really, really hard. The day they told me was the day of my big Neuralink tour at their Fremont facility. They told me like right before we went over there. It was really hard to hear. My initial reaction was, all right, go in, fix it. Like, go in, take it out and fix it. The first surgery was so easy. Like I went to sleep. A couple hours later, I woke up and here we are. I didn't feel any pain, didn't take like any pain pills or anything. So I just knew that if they wanted to, they could go in and put in a new one like next day, if that's what it took. Because I wanted it to be better, and I wanted not to lose the capability. I had so much fun playing with it for a few weeks, for a month. I had, like, it had opened up so many doors for me. It had opened up so many more possibilities that I didn't want to lose it after a month. I thought it would have been a cruel twist of fate if I had gotten to see the view from like the top of this mountain and then have it all come crashing down after a month. And I knew, like, say the top of the mountain, but how I saw it was I was just now starting to climb the mountain, and there was so much more that I knew was possible. And so to have all of that be taken away was really, really hard. But then on the drive over to the facility, I don't know, like 5-minute drive, whatever it is, I talked with my parents about it. I prayed about it. I was just like, I'm not going to let this ruin my day. I'm not going to let this ruin this amazing like tour that they have set up for me. Like, I want to go show everyone how much I appreciate all the work they're doing. I want to go like meet all of the people who have made this possible. And I want to go have one of the best days of my life. And I did. And it was amazing. And it absolutely was one of the best days I've ever been privileged to experience. And then for a few days, I was pretty down in the dumps. But for like the first few days afterwards, I was just like, I didn't know if it was ever going to work again. And then I made the decision that even if I lost the ability to use the Neuralink, even if I like lost out on everything to come, if I could keep giving them data in any way, then I would do that. If I needed to just do like some of the data collection every day or body mapping every day for a year, then I would do it. Because I know that everything I'm doing helps everyone to come after me. And that's all I wanted. I guess the whole reason that I did this was to help people. And I knew that anything I could do to help, I would continue to do. Even if I never got to use the cursor again, then, I was just happy to be a part of it. And everything that I had done was just a perk. It was something that I got to experience. And I know how amazing it's going to be for everyone to come after me. So might as well just keep trucking along,
Well, that said, you were able to get to work your way up to get the performance back. So this is like going from Rocky 1 to Rocky 2. So when did you first realize that this is possible, and what gave you sort of the strength, the motivation, the determination to do it, to increase back up and beat your previous record?
Yeah, it was within a couple of weeks. Like,
again, this feels like I'm interviewing an athlete. This is great. I like to thank my parents.
The road back was long and hard, fraught with many difficulties. There were dark days. It was a couple weeks, I think, and then there was just a turning point. I think they had switched how they were measuring the neuron spikes in my brain, like the Bliss, help me out.
Yeah, the way in which we were measuring the behavior of individual neurons.
Yeah.
So we're switching from sort of individual spike detection to something called spike band power, which if you watch the previous segments with either me or DJ, you probably have some context.
Yeah, okay. Mm-hmm. So when they did that, it was kind of like light over the head, like light bulb moment, like, oh, this works. And this seems like we can run with this. And I saw the uptick in performance immediately. Like, I could feel it when they switched over. I was like, this is better. Like, this is good. Like, everything up till this point for the last few weeks, last like whatever 3 or 4 weeks, because it was before they even told me, like, everything before this sucked. Like, let's keep doing what we're doing now. And at that point, it was not like, oh, I know I'm still only at, like, say in WebGrid terms, like 4 or 5 BPS compared to my 7.5 before. But I know that if we keep doing this, then like I can get back there. And then they gave me the dwell cursor, and the dwell cursor sucked at first. It's obviously not what I want, but it gave me a path forward to be able to continue using it, and hopefully to continue to help out. And so I just ran with it, never looked back. Like I said, I'm just kind of person, I roll with the punches anyway. So
what was the process? What was the feedback loop on the figuring out how to do the spike detection in a way that would actually work well for Nolan?
Yeah, it's a great question. So maybe just to describe first how the actual update worked. It was basically an update to your implant. So we just did an over-the-air software update to his implant, same way you'd update your Tesla or your iPhone. And that firmware change enabled us to record sort of averages of populations of neurons nearby an individual electrode. So we have sort of less resolution about which individual neuron is doing what, but we have a broader picture of what's going on nearby an electrode overall. And that feedback loop, I mean, basically, as Nolan described it, was immediate when we flipped that switch. I think the first day we did that, you hit 3 or 4 BPS right out of the box. And that was a light bulb moment for, okay, this is the right path to go down. And from there, there's a lot of feedback around like how to make this useful for independent use. So what we care about ultimately is that you can use it independently to do whatever you want. And to get to that point, it required us to re-engineer the UX, as you talked about with the dwell cursor, to make it something that you can use independently without us needing to be involved all the time. And yeah, this is obviously the start of this journey still. Hopefully we get back to the places where you're doing multiple clicks and using that to control much more fluidly everything and much more naturally the applications that you're trying to interface with.
And most importantly, get that web grid number up.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So how's on the hover click, do you accidentally click stuff sometimes?
Yep.
Like how hard is it to avoid accidentally clicking?
I have to continuously keep it moving, basically. So like I said, there's a threshold where it will initiate a click. So if I ever drop below that, it'll start, and I have 0.3 seconds to move it before it clicks anything. Okay. And if I don't want it to ever get there, I just keep it moving at a certain speed and like just constantly like doing circles on screen, moving it back and forth to keep it from clicking stuff. I actually noticed a couple weeks back that when I was not using the implant, I was just moving my hand back and forth or in circles, like I was trying to keep the cursor from clicking, and I was just doing it like while I was trying to go to sleep, and I was like, okay, this is a problem.
To avoid the clicking. I guess does that create problems like when you're gaming, accidentally click a thing? Like
yeah, it happens in chess. I've lost a number of games because I'll accidentally click something.
I think the first time I ever beat you was because of an accidental
misclick. Yeah.
It's a nice excuse, right?
Yeah.
You can always, anytime you lose, you could just say, that was accidental.
Yeah.
You said the app improved a lot from version 1 when you first started using it. It was very different. So can you just talk about the trial and error that you went through with the team, like 200 plus pages of notes? Like, what's that process like of going back and forth and working together to improve the thing?
It's a lot of me just using it like day in and day out and saying like, hey, can you guys do this for me? Like, give me this. I want to be able to do that. I need this. I think a lot of it just doesn't occur to them maybe until someone is actually using the app, using the implant. It's just something that they just never would have thought of, or it's very specific to even like me, maybe what I want. It's something I'm a little worried about with the next people that come is, maybe they will want things much different than how I've set it up or what the advice I've given the team. And they're going to look at some of the things they've added for me. I'm like, that's a dumb idea. Like, why would he ask for that? And so I'm really looking forward to get the next people on, because I guarantee that they're going to think of things that I've never thought of. And they're going to think of improvements. I'm like, wow, that's a really good idea. Like, I wish I would have thought of that. And then they're also going to give me some pushback about like, yeah, what you are asking them to do here, that's a bad idea. Let's do it this way. And I'm more than happy to have that happen. But it's just a lot of like, different interactions with different games or applications, the internet, just with the computer in general. There's tons of bugs that end up popping up left, right, center. So it's just me trying to use it as much as possible and showing them what works and what doesn't work and what I would like to be better. And then they take that feedback and they usually create amazing things for me. They solve these problems in ways I would have never imagined. They're so good at everything they do. And so I'm just really thankful that I'm able to give them feedback and they can make something of it, because a lot of my feedback is like really dumb. It's just like, I want this, please do something about it. And they'll come back and super well thought out. And it's way better than anything I could have ever thought of or implemented myself. So they're just great. They're really, really cool.
As the BCI community grows, would you like to hang out with the other folks with Neuralinks? Like what relationship, if any, would you want to have with them? Because you said like they might have a different set of like ideas of how to use the thing. Would you be intimidated by their web grid performance?
No, I hope
compete.
I hope day one they like wipe the floor with me. I hope they beat it, and they crush it. Double it if they can. Just because on one hand, it's only going to push me to be better, because I'm super competitive. I want other people to push me. I think that is important for anyone trying to achieve greatness is they need other people around them who are going to push them to be better. And I even made a joke about it on X once, like once the next people get chosen, like cue buddy cop music. Like I'm just excited to have other people to do this with and to like share experiences with. I'm more than happy to interact with them as much as they want. I'm more than happy to give them advice. I don't know what kind of advice I could give them, but if they have questions, I'm more than happy.
What advice would you have for the next participant in the clinical trial?
That they should have fun with this, because it is a lot of fun, and that I hope they work really, really hard, because it's not just for us, it's for everyone that comes after us. And come to me if they need anything, and to go to Neuralink if they need anything. Man, Neuralink moves mountains. Like they do absolutely anything for me that they can. And it's an amazing support system to have. It puts my mind at ease, for like so many things that I have had like questions about, so many things I want to do. And they're always there. And that's really, really nice. And so I would tell them not to be afraid to go to Neuralink with any questions that they have, any concerns, anything that, they're looking to do with this, and any help that Neuralink is capable of providing. I know they will. And I don't know, just work your ass off, because it's really important that we try to give our all to this.
So have fun and work hard.
Yeah, there we go. Maybe that's what I'll just start saying to people. Have fun, work hard.
Now you're a real pro athlete. Just keep it short. Maybe it's good to talk about what you've been able to do now that you have a Neuralink implant, like the freedom you gain from this way of interacting with the outside world. Like you play video games all night, and you do that by yourself.
Yeah.
And that's a kind of freedom. Can you speak to that freedom that you gain?
Yeah, it's what all, I don't know, people in my position want. They just want more independence. The more load that I can take away from people around me, the better. If I'm able to interact with the world without using my family, without going through any of my friends, like needing them to help me with things, the better. If I'm able to sit up on my computer all night and not need someone to like sit me up, say like on my iPad, like in a position where I can use it, and then have to have them wait up for me all night until I'm ready to be done using it. Like that, it takes a load off of all of us, and it's really like all I can ask for. It's something that, I could never thank Neuralink enough for, and I know my family feels the same way. Just being able to have the freedom to do things on my own at any hour of the day or night, it means the world to me. And I don't know.
When you're up at 2 a.m. playing WebGrid by yourself, I just imagine like it's darkness and there's just a light glowing and you're just focused. What's going through your mind? Or you're like in a state of flow where it's like the mind is empty, like those like Zen masters.
Yeah. Generally, it is me playing music of some sort. I have a massive playlist, and so I'm just like rocking out to music. And then it's also just like a race against time, because I'm constantly looking at how much battery percentage I have left on my implant. Like, all right, I have 30%, which equates to, X amount of time, which means I have to break this record in the next, hour and a half, or else it's not happening tonight. Yeah. And so it's a little stressful when that happens. When it's above 50%, I'm like, okay, like I got time. And it starts getting down to 30 and then 20. It's like, all right, 10%, a little pop-up's going to pop up right here, and it's going to really screw my WebGrid flow. Yeah. It's going to tell me that, like there's a low battery pop-up comes up, and I'm like, it's really going to screw me over. So if I'm going to break this record, I have to do it in the next like 30 seconds, or else that pop-up's going to get in the way, like cover my WebGrid. And then after that, I go click on it, go back into WebGrid, and I'm like, all right, that means I have, 10 minutes left before this thing's dead. That's what's going on in my head, generally, that and whatever song is playing. And I just I want to break those records so bad. Like it's all I want when I'm playing WebGrid. It has become less of like, oh, this is just a leisurely activity. Like I just enjoy doing this because it just feels so nice and it puts me at ease. It is no. Once I'm in WebGrid, you better break this record or you're gonna waste like 5 hours of your life right now. And I don't know. It's just fun. It's fun, man.
Have you ever tried WebGrid with like 2 targets and 3 targets? Can you get higher BPS with that?
Can you do that?
You mean like different color targets, or you mean
get multiple targets? Yeah, or does that change the thing?
Yeah, so BPS is log of number of targets times correct minus incorrect divided by time, and so you can think of like different clicks as basically doubling the number of active targets.
Got it.
So you basically higher BPS, the more options there are, the more difficult the task. And there's also like Zen mode you've played in before, which is like infinite canvas.
It covers the whole screen with a grid, and I don't know
what. Yeah. And so you can go like that's insane.
Yeah.
He doesn't like it because it didn't show BPS. So like, Oh
yeah.
I had them put in a giant BPS in the background. So now it's like the opposite of Zen mode. It's like super hard mode, like just metal mode of it's just like a giant number in the back counting.
We should rename that. Metal mode is a much better name.
So you also play Civilization 6.
I love Civ 6, yeah.
Usually go with Korea.
I do. Yeah. So the great part about Korea is they focus on like science tech victories, which was not planned. Like I've been playing Korea for years, and then all of the Neuralink stuff happened. So it kind of aligns. But what I've noticed with tech victories is if you can just rush tech, rush science, then you can do anything. Like at one point in the game, you will be so far ahead of everyone technologically that you will have like musketmen, infantrymen, planes sometimes, and people will still be fighting with like bows and arrows. And so if you want to win a domination victory, you just get to a certain point with the science and then go and wipe out the rest of the world. Or you can just take science all the way and win that way. And you're going to be so far ahead of everyone because you're producing so much science that it's not even close. I've accidentally won in different ways just by focusing on science.
Accidentally won by focusing on science.
I was playing only science, obviously, like just science all the way, just tech. And I was trying to get like every tech in the tech tree and stuff. And then I accidentally won through a diplomatic victory. And I was so mad. I was so mad. Because it just like ends the game one turn. It was like, oh, you won. You're so diplomatic. I'm like, I don't want to do this. I should have declared war on more people or something. It was terrible. But you don't need like giant civilizations with tech, especially with Korea. You can keep it pretty small. So I generally just, get to a certain military unit and put them all around my border to keep everyone out. And then I will just build up. So very isolationist.
Nice.
Yeah.
Just work on the science of the tech.
That's it.
You're making it sound so fun.
It's so much fun.
And I also saw a Civilization 7 trailer.
Oh man, I'm so pumped.
And that's probably coming out.
Come on, Civ 7, hit me up. I'll alpha, beta test, whatever.
Wait, well, when is it coming out?
In 2025.
Next year, yeah. What other stuff would you like to see improved about the Neuralink app and just the entire experience?
I would like to, like I said, get back to the like click on demand, like the regular clicks. That would be great. I would like to be able to connect to more devices. Right now, it's just the computer. I'd like to be able to use it on my phone or use it on different consoles, different platforms. I'd like to be able to control as much stuff as possible, honestly. Like an Optimus robot would be pretty cool. That would be sick if I could control an Optimus robot. The Link app itself, it seems like we are getting pretty dialed in to what it might look like down the road. Seems like we've gotten through a lot of what I want from it, at least. The only other thing I would say is like more control over all the parameters that I can tweak with my like cursor and stuff. There's a lot of things that go into how the cursor moves in certain ways. And I have, I don't know, like 3 or 4 of those parameters, and there
like
might
gain
be
and friction and all
gain,
that.
friction, yeah. And there's maybe double the amount of those with just like velocity and then with the actual dwell cursor. So I would like all of it. I want as much control over my environment as possible.
So you
Especially
want like advanced mode, like in like there's menus, usually there's basic
Yep.
mode,
Mhm.
and you're like one of those folks, like
I go
the
into
power user,
everything.
advanced.
Yeah. That's
Got it.
that's what I want. I want as much control over this as possible. So yeah, that's really all I can ask for. Just give me everything.
Has speech been useful? Like just being able to talk also in addition to everything else?
Yeah, you mean like while I'm using it?
While you're using it, like speech to text?
Oh yeah.
Or do you type, or like, because there's also a keyboard.
Yeah,
really
yeah.
Nice.
So there's a virtual keyboard. That's another thing I would like to work more on, is finding some way to type or text in a different way. Right now it is like a dictation basically, and a virtual keyboard that I can use with the cursor. But we've played around with like finger spelling, like sign language finger spelling. And that seems really promising. So I have this thought in my head that it's going to be a very similar learning curve that I had with the cursor, where I went from attempted movement to imagined movement at one point. I have a feeling, this is just my intuition, that at some point I'm going to be doing finger spelling and I won't need to actually attempt to fingerspell anymore, that I'll just be able to think the like letter that I want and it'll pop up.
That would be epic.
Yeah. And
that's challenging.
Yeah.
That's hard. That's a lot of work for you to kind of take that leap, but that would be awesome.
And then like going from letters to words is another step. Like you would go from, right now it's finger spelling of like just the sign language alphabet. But if it's able to pick that up, then it should be able to pick up like the whole sign language, like language. And so then if I could do something along those lines, or just the sign language spelled word, if I can, spell it at a reasonable speed and it can pick that up, then I would just be able to think that through and it would do the same thing. I don't see why not. After what I saw with the cursor control, I don't see why it wouldn't work, but we'd have to play around with it more.
What was the process in terms of like training yourself to go from attempted movement to imagined movement?
Yeah.
How long did that take? So like how long would this kind of process take?
Well, it was a couple weeks before it just like happened upon me. But now that I know that was possible, I think I could make it happen with other things. I think it would be much, much simpler.
Would you get an upgraded implant device?
Sure. Absolutely. Whenever they'll let me.
So you don't have any concerns for you with the surgery experience? All of it was like no regrets?
No.
So everything's been good so far?
Yep.
You just keep getting upgrades?
Yeah. I mean, why not? I've seen how much it's impacted my life already. Yeah. And I know that everything from here on out is just going to get better and better. So I would love to. I would love to get the upgrade.
What future capabilities are you excited about, sort of beyond this kind of telepathy? Is vision interesting? So for folks who, for example, who are blind, so Neuralink enabling people to see, or for speech?
Yeah, there's a lot that's very, very cool about this. I mean, we're talking about the brain, so there's like, this is just motor cortex stuff. There's so much more that can be done. The vision one is fascinating to me. I think that is going to be very, very cool. To give someone the ability to see for the first time in their life would just be, I mean, it might be more amazing than even helping someone like me. Like, that just sounds incredible. The speech thing is really interesting. Being able to have some sort of like real-time translation and cut away that language barrier would be really cool. Any sort of like actual impairments that it could solve, like with speech, would be very, very cool. And then also there are a lot of different disabilities that all originate in the brain, and you would be able to hopefully be able to solve a lot of those. I know there's already stuff to help people with seizures that can be implanted in the brain. This would do, I imagine, the same thing. And so you could do something like that. I know that, even someone like Joe Rogan has talked about the possibilities with being able to stimulate the brain in different ways I'm not sure. I'm not sure what, like how ethical a lot of that would be. That's beyond me, honestly. But I know that there is a lot that can be done when we're talking about the brain and being able to go in and physically make changes to help people or to improve their lives. So I'm really looking forward to everything that comes from this. And I don't think it's all that far off. I think a lot of this can be implemented within my lifetime, assuming that I live a long life.
What you were referring to is things like people suffering from depression or things of that nature potentially getting help.
Yeah. Flip a switch like that, make someone happy. I think Joe has talked about it more in terms of like, you want to experience like what a drug trip feels like. Like you want to experience what it'd be like to be on,
of course.
Mushrooms or something like that, DMT. Like you can just flip that switch in the brain. My buddy Bane has talked about being able to like wipe parts of your memory and re-experience things that, like for the first time, like your favorite movie or your favorite book, like just wipe that out real quick and then re-fall in love with Harry Potter or something. I told him, I was like, I don't know how I feel about like people being able to just wipe parts of your memory. That seems a little sketchy to me. He's like, they're already doing it. So
sounds legit. Yeah. I would love memory replay. Just actually like high resolution replay of old memories.
Yeah. I saw an episode of Black Mirror about that once. I don't think I want it.
Yeah, so Black Mirror always kind of considers the worst case, which is important. I think people don't consider the best case or the average case enough. I don't know what it is about us humans. We want to think about the worst possible thing.
Yeah.
We love drama.
Yeah.
It's like, how is this new technology going to kill everybody out there? We just love that. Well, we get like, yes, let's watch.
Hopefully people don't think about that too much with me. It'll ruin a lot of my plans.
Yeah, I assume you're going to have to take over the world. I mean, I love your Twitter. You tweeted, I'd like to make jokes about hearing voices in my head since getting the Neuralink, but I feel like people would take it the wrong way. Plus, the voices in my head told me not to.
Yeah.
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 Please never stop. So you were talking about Optimus. Is that something you would love to be able to do to control the robotic arm or the entirety of Optimus?
Oh, yeah, for sure. For sure. Absolutely.
You think there's something like fundamentally different about just being able to physically interact with the world?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I know another thing with like being able to like give people the ability to like feel sensation and stuff too by going in with the brain and having the Neuralink maybe do that. That could be something that could be transferred through the Optimus as well. Like there's all sorts of really cool interplay between that. And then also, like you said, just physically interacting. I mean, 99% of the things that I can't do myself, obviously I need a caretaker for, someone to physically do things for me. If an Optimus robot could do that, like I could live an incredibly independent life and not be such a burden on those around me. And it would change the way people like me live, at least until whatever this is gets cured. But being able to interact with the world physically like that would just be amazing. And they're not just like for having it be a caretaker or something, but something like I talked about, just being able to read a book. Imagine an Optimus robot just being able to hold a book open in front of me, like get that smell again. I might not be able to feel it at that point. Or maybe I could again with the sensation and stuff, but there's something different about reading like a physical book than staring at a screen or listening to an audiobook. I actually don't like audiobooks. I've listened to a ton of them at this point, but I don't really like them. I would much rather like read a physical copy.
So one of the things you would love to be able to experience is opening the book, bringing it up to you, and to feel the touch of the paper.
Yeah. Oh man, the touch, the smell. I mean, it's just something about the words on the page, and they've replicated that page color on like the Kindle and stuff. Yeah, it's just not the same. Yeah, so just something as simple as that.
So one of the things you miss is touch.
I do. Yeah, a lot of things that I interact with in the world, like clothes or literally any physical thing that I interact with in the world. A lot of times what
people around me will do is they'll just come like rub it on my face. They'll like lay something on me so I can feel the weight. They will rub, a shirt on me so I can feel fabric. Like there's something very profound about touch, and it's something that I miss a lot, and something I would love to do again. We'll see.
What would be the first thing you do with a hand that can touch? Give your mom a hug after that, right?
Yeah, I know. It's one thing that I've asked like God for basically every day since my accident, was just being able to like one day move, even if it was only like my hand, so that way like I could squeeze my mom's hand or something, just to like show her that, like how much I care and how much I love her and everything. Something along those lines, being able to just interact with the people around me, handshake, give someone a hug. I don't know, anything like that. Being able to help me eat, like I'd probably get really fat, which would be a terrible, terrible thing.
Also beat Bliss in chess on a physical chessboard.
Yeah. I mean, there are just so many upsides, and any way to find some way to feel like I'm bringing Bliss down to my level.
Yeah.
Because he's just such an amazing guy, and everything about him is just so above and beyond, that anything I can do to take him down a notch, I'm more than happy.
Yeah. Humble him a bit. He needs it.
Yeah.
Okay. As he's sitting next to me. Did you ever make sense of why God puts good people through such hardship?
Oh, man. I think it's all about understanding how much we need God. And I don't think that there's any light without the dark. I think that if all of us were happy all the time, there would be, no reason to turn to God ever. I feel like there would be no concept of, good or bad. And I think that as much of like the darkness and the evil that's in the world, it makes us all appreciate the good and the things we have so much more. And I think, like when I had my accident, one of the first things I said to one of my best friends was, and this was within like the first month or two after my accident, I said, everything about this accident has just made me understand and believe that like God is real, and that there really is a God, basically, and that like my interactions with him have all been, real and worthwhile. And he said, if anything, seeing me go through this accident, he believes that there isn't a God. And it's a very different reaction. But I believe that it is a way for God to test us, to build our character, to send us through trials and tribulations, to make sure that we understand how precious, he is, and the things that he's given us and the time that he's given us. And then to hopefully grow from all of that. I think that's a huge part of being here, is to not just, have an easy life and do everything that's easy, but to step out of our comfort zones and really challenge ourselves, because I think that's how we grow.
What gives you hope about this whole thing we have going on? Human civilization.
Oh, man. I think people are my biggest inspiration. Even just being at Neuralink for a few months, looking people in the eyes and hearing their motivations for why they're doing this, it's so inspiring. And I know that they could be other places, at cushier jobs, working somewhere else, doing X, Y, or Z that doesn't really mean that much. But instead they're here and they want to better humanity, and they want to better just the people around them, the people that they've interacted with in their life. They want to make better lives for their own family members who might have disabilities, or they look at someone like me and they say, I can do something about that, so I'm going to. And it's always been what I've connected with most in the world are people. I've always been a people person, and I love learning about people, and I love learning like how people developed and where they came from, and to see like how much people are willing to do for someone like me when they don't have to, and they're going out of their way to make my life better. It gives me a lot of hope for just humanity in general, how much we care and how much we're capable of when we all kind of get together and try to make a difference. And I know there's a lot of bad out there in the world, but there always has been and there always will be. And I think that it shows human resiliency, and it shows what we're able to endure, and how much we just want to be there and help each other, and how much satisfaction we get from that. Because I think that's one of the reasons that we're here, is just to help each other. And I don't know, that always gives me hope, is just realizing that there are people out there who still care and who want to help.
And thank you for being one such human being, and continuing to be a great human being through everything you've been through, and being an inspiration to many people, to myself, for many reasons, including your epic, unbelievably great performance on WebGrid. I will be training all night tonight to try to catch up.
You can do it.
And I believe in you that you can, once you come back, so sorry to interrupt with the Austin trip, once you come back, eventually beat Bliss.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
I'm rooting for you. The whole world is rooting for you.
Thank
you for everything you've done, man.
Thanks, man.
Thanks for listening to this conversation with Nolan Arbaugh, and before that with Elon Musk, DJ Saw, Matthew McDougall, and Bliss Chapman. To support this podcast, please check out our sponsors in the description. And now, let me leave you with some words from Aldous Huxley in The Doors of Perception. We live together. We act on and react to one another. But always, and in all circumstances, we are by ourselves. The martyrs go hand in hand into the arena. They are crucified alone. Embraced, the lovers desperately try to fuse their insulated ecstasies into a single self-transcendence. In vain. But its very nature, every embodied spirit is doomed to suffer and enjoy its solitude. Sensations, feelings, insights, fancies, all these are private, and except through symbols and, at second hand, incommunicable. We can pool information about experiences, but never the experiences themselves. From family to nation, every human group is a society of island universes. Thank you for listening, and hope to see you next time.